You think you know what betrayal looks like? Picture this. A billionaire mogul kissing another woman on a blood-red carpet while his wife watches from 1,000 screens. But that's not the story. The story is what she became in the darkness after she disappeared. The story is the matte black SUVs that rolled up to his gala 3 months later. The story is the empire that burned in a single night and the woman who held the match. Stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale of calculated vengeance has traveled. The first camera flash felt like a slap. Serafina Vance stood in the kitchen of their Barcelona penthouse, phone pressed against her ear, watching the newsfeed reload with a mechanical compulsion she couldn't stop. Her thumb moved without permission. Refresh. 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 Each time the image remained. Her husband, Adrian Kestrel, mouth locked against the throat of a woman barely out of her 20s, his hand splayed possessively across the actress's bare back. The red carpet beneath them looked slick, almost wet. The caption underneath scrolled in 3 languages, each translation equally efficient at gutting her. Billionaire Adrian Kestrel makes public statement at Madrid charity gala statement. They called it a statement. She set the phone down on the marble countertop with a control that surprised her. No shake in her fingers. No tremor. Just a woman placing a phone on a surface while her marriage detonated across every screen in Europe. The kitchen smelled like coffee she hadn't drunk, and jasmine from the arrangement Adrian's assistant sent every Monday. Serafina stared at those white flowers now, their petals perfect and bloodless. Her reflection caught in the darkened window. A woman in silk pajamas at 2 in the morning, hair still neat from the chignon she'd worn to yesterday's board meeting. 34 years old. Chief Strategy Officer of Vance and Meridian Consulting, married to Adrian Kestrel for 6 years. Those were facts. Data points. They felt as substantial as smoke. The phone buzzed. Then again. Then it became a continuous vibration, messages stacking like a pileup on a highway. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she walked to the bar cart and poured 2 fingers of Adrian's Japanese whiskey into a crystal tumbler, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She drank it neat, feeling the burn track down her throat with a clarity that bordered on surgical. The penthouse door opened at 3:47 a.m. She heard his keys hit the bowl in the entryway, the same sound as every other night for 6 years. His footsteps crossed the marble foyer, Italian leather shoes, custom made. She'd been there for the fitting. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, still wearing his tuxedo, bow tie undone, and hanging like a noose around his collar. He looked tired. Not guilty. Just tired. "You're awake," he said. Serafina took another sip of his whiskey. "Did you expect me to sleep?" "I expected you to call." Adrian moved to the coffee maker, began the ritual of grinding beans like this was a morning after any other night. "Everyone else did." "I'm not everyone else." "No." He didn't look at her. "You're not." The coffee grinder shrieked. She waited. When it stopped, the silence felt thicker than before, something with weight and texture. Adrian measured out water with the same precision he applied to hostile takeovers. His shoulders were tight beneath the tuxedo jacket. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Are you going to ask?" he finally said. "Ask what?" "If it's real, if it means anything." Serafina set down her glass. The clink against marble was the only sound. "Does it matter?" That made him turn. His eyes were the color of smoke, the same shade that had arrested her at a Vienna conference 8 years ago when he'd been building his first empire and she'd been the consultant hired to save it. He looked at her now with something that might have been frustration or might have been relief. She couldn't tell anymore. "Of course it matters," he said. "Does it? You kissed her in front of cameras, Adrian. At a gala, you made sure every outlet in Europe caught it." She heard her voice, level and analytical, the same tone she used in boardrooms. "That's not an affair. That's a declaration." He turned back to the coffee. "You're overreacting." "I'm observing." "Same thing with you." "No." She stood, silk pajamas whispering. "Overreacting would be throwing that coffee pot at your head. Observing is noting that you chose the Madrid event specifically, the one I declined to attend because of the Singapore deal closing. Observing is recognizing that Natalia Sokolov is young enough to be photogenic, but established enough to have her own tabloid following. Observing is understanding that you waited until I was 7 time zones away. Adrian poured coffee into a mug, steam rising. You think I planned this? I think you executed it. He laughed. The sound was bitter. Christ, Serafina, not everything is a strategy session. With you, everything is. She watched him drink, the same way she'd watched him across conference tables and charity dinners and hotel rooms in 14 countries. 6 years of watching, of analyzing, of believing that his ambition and her intelligence were enough to build something that looked like partnership. She'd been wrong about the last part. What do you want me to say? Adrian set down the mug with more force than necessary, coffee sloshed. That I'm sorry? That it won't happen again? I want you to be honest. I'm always honest. Then be honest now. Serafina met his eyes. Are you leaving me for her? The question hung between them like a blade. Adrian's face did something complicated, a flicker of surprise maybe, or calculation. He exhaled slowly. No, he said. I'm not leaving you. But you're keeping her. He didn't answer, didn't need to. The silence was confirmation enough. Serafina nodded once, a small, decisive movement. Okay. Adrian's eyebrows lifted. That's it? No fight? No ultimatum? Would it change anything? He studied her, and for a moment she saw something that might have been disappointment cross his features, as if her calm was somehow a failure on her part, as if he'd wanted the drama. No, he admitted. It wouldn't. Then we're done talking. She walked past him toward the bedroom. His hand shot out, caught her wrist. Not rough, but firm. She stopped. Didn't pull away. Just stood there feeling his thumb against her pulse point. Serafina. His voice dropped. This doesn't have to destroy everything we've built. She looked at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. You already did that. I'm just acknowledging it. He let go. She continued to the bedroom, closed the door behind her with a soft click, and stood in the darkness listening to her own breathing. Her heart beat steady, too steady. She waited for the crack, the break, the moment when emotion would flood in and drown her. It didn't come. Instead, she felt something colder. Clarity. The law firm's office sat in a glass tower overlooking Barcelona's port. Serafina arrived at 9 a.m. wearing a charcoal Armani suit and carrying a slim leather portfolio. The receptionist recognized her, everyone in Barcelona's financial district did, and ushered her immediately to a private conference room with soundproof walls and a view of the Mediterranean. Margaret Reeves was waiting. 60 years old, silver hair cut sharp as a blade, reputation for destroying men who underestimated her. She stood when Serafina entered, extended a hand. Mrs. Kestrel, thank you for coming. Miss Vance, Serafina corrected softly. I kept my name. Smart, Margaret gestured to a chair. Coffee? Water? Neither. I have a meeting at 11. Margaret sat, folded her hands on the mahogany table. Then let's be efficient. You want a divorce. I want to understand my options. Your options are limited. Margaret slid a document across the table. Your prenuptial agreement is ironclad. I reviewed it this morning. In the event of dissolution, you retain your pre-marriage assets and your share of Vance and Meridian. Everything else, the properties, the investments made during the marriage, the joint accounts, reverts to him unless you can prove fault. Adultery is fault. In theory, in practice? Margaret's expression was kind but clinical. He'll argue it was consensual non-monogamy, that you had an understanding, that the marriage was already functionally over, and unless you have documented evidence of explicit agreements to the contrary, a judge will likely side with ambiguity. Serafina absorbed this without reaction. What about his business holdings? Kestrel Corp is entirely his. You have no equity stake, no board position, no claim. Margaret paused. However, if you could prove that marital funds were used to prop up failing ventures, or that he engaged in financial misconduct, we might have leverage. Do you have access to his accounts? No. Communications, emails, texts discussing business decisions? Nothing that would constitute evidence of wrongdoing. Margaret sat back. Then I'm afraid your leverage is minimal. You'd walk away with your consulting firm and approximately 8 million euros in personal assets. He'd retain everything else, conservatively estimated at 2 billion. The number hung in the air like a verdict. Serafina looked out at the Mediterranean, watching container ships crawl across the horizon. She thought about the 6 years she'd spent building Adrian's empire alongside her own, the deals she'd structured, the crises she'd managed, the nights she'd rewritten his presentations because his vision exceeded his execution. "What if I don't want a divorce?" she said quietly. Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me? What if I want to stay married and destroy him?" A long pause. Then Margaret leaned forward, and something almost like a smile touched her mouth. "Now that's a different conversation, but it's not a legal one." "No," Serafina agreed. "It's not." She left the law office at 10:42, took the elevator down 60 floors, and walked out into Barcelona's morning heat. Her phone buzzed continuously, messages from colleagues, from Adrian's publicist asking for a statement, from former friends who wanted to know if she was okay. She ignored all of them. Instead, she pulled up a different contact, a name she'd saved 3 years ago after a chance encounter at a Vienna conference. A man who'd sat across from her at a hotel bar and said things that made her uncomfortable in their accuracy. Who'd handed her a card and told her to call if she ever needed to understand the game beneath the game. She'd never called. She called now. The line rang twice, then a voice, accented and smooth. "Ms. Vance, I wondered when I'd hear from you." "Mr. Droukov," she said, "I need to discuss a business opportunity." "Of course, though I suspect what you need is not business." A pause. "Where are you?" "Barcelona." "I'm in Prague. I can be there by evening. The usual hotel?" "No." She thought quickly. "Somewhere private. Somewhere he won't think to look." "I know a place. I'll send coordinates. Come alone." His voice held a note of something dark and amused. "Though I suspect you already planned to." The call ended. Serafina stood on the street corner, Barcelona churning around her, tourists and businessmen and couples holding hands, normal people living normal lives. She wondered what that felt like, if she'd ever known. Her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. A message from Adrian. "Where are you? We need to talk about optics." Optics. Not about their marriage. Not about what he'd done. About how it looked. She typed back. "Unavailable. Handle it yourself." Then she turned off her phone and started walking. The coordinates led to a villa 40 kilometers outside Barcelona, hidden in the hills where old money went to pretend it wasn't rotting. Serafina arrived at sunset in a rented sedan. No driver, no security. The villa was modest by billionaire standards, just a restored stone farmhouse with iron gates and olive groves stretching to the horizon. A man in a dark suit met her at the gate. He didn't introduce himself, just checked her phone was off and gestured for her to follow. They walked through gardens where lavender grew wild, past a fountain that had been running for 200 years, to a terrace overlooking the valley. Lucien Droukov stood with his back to her, watching the sun bleed into the hills. She'd met him 3 years ago, remembered him as dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with violence, though she suspected he was capable of that too. He was maybe 40, maybe younger, with the kind of face that cameras loved and mothers warned their daughters about. Dark hair, darker eyes. The kind of still presence that made people nervous without understanding why. He turned when she approached, smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Serafina Vance, you look different. It's been 3 years." "That's not what I mean." He gestured to a chair. A bottle of wine sat breathing on the table between them, unlabeled. "You look like someone who's made a decision." She sat. "What gave it away?" "The fact that you're here." He poured wine into 2 glasses, slid one toward her. 3 years ago, you took my card out of politeness, filed it away, told yourself you'd never need someone like me. Now you're sitting on my terrace in the Spanish countryside with your phone off. That's not politeness." "No," she agreed. "It's not." They drank in silence. The wine was extraordinary, something old and brutal and honest. It tasted like the truth she'd been avoiding. "I need to know what you do," Serafina said finally. "Really?" "Not the public story." Lucien set down his glass. "I solve problems that can't be solved through legal channels. I move resources through networks that don't appear on any ledger. I make things happen that people claim are impossible." He studied her. But you already knew that. I knew enough to save your number. Smart. He leaned back, though what I do isn't the question you really want to ask. What is? You want to know if I can destroy Adrian Kestrel without it tracing back to you. Serafina felt something cold settle in her chest. Can you? Of course. He said it casually, like discussing the weather. But that's also the wrong question. Then what should I be asking? Lucian studied her in the dying light. You should be asking what it will cost you, and I don't mean money. She met his eyes. What will it cost? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the terrace edge, looked out over the valley where lights were beginning to wake in distant villages. Everything you are now, you'll have to become something else, he said. The woman who sat in boardrooms and played by rules, she dies. What replaces her is colder, sharper, capable of things that will keep you awake at night. He turned. And once you start down that path, there's no going back. Even if you win, you lose something. I already lost something, Serafina said quietly. He took it. No. Lucien's voice was gentle and brutal at once. He revealed that it was never really yours. There's a difference. The truth of it hit like a fist. She looked down at her wine, at the way the sunset turned it the color of old blood. Thought about Adrian kissing another woman where the whole world could see. Thought about 6 years of believing partnership mattered more than power. Thought about the prenup that made her irrelevant and the lawyer who'd confirmed her worst suspicions. I want him destroyed, she said. Completely. Not just financially. I want his name to mean ruin. I want everyone who sees him to remember what happens when you treat people like they're disposable. That's better, Lucian returned to his chair. That's honest. Can you do it? The question isn't, can I? The question is, can you? He poured more wine. What I'm offering isn't a service. It's a partnership. You bring your strategic mind, your knowledge of his operations, your understanding of the systems he operates in. I bring resources, reach, and a willingness to operate in spaces that make you uncomfortable. Together, we dismantle him piece by piece. In exchange for what? For now? Access to your skills? I have interests that would benefit from someone with your analytical capabilities. He smiled. Think of it as consulting work, just with higher stakes. Serafina considered this. And later? Later, we see what kind of woman emerges from this process. His eyes held hers. Maybe she wants to continue the partnership. Maybe she doesn't. But I suspect you'll find that the world you're entering is more interesting than the one you're leaving. She should have been afraid. Should have stood up and walked away from this man and his villa and his casual talk of destroying lives. Should have gone back to Barcelona and filed for divorce and taken her 8 million and rebuilt something clean. Instead, she felt alive for the first time in months. When do we start? She asked. Lucien smiled. This time it did reach his eyes. We already have. The moment you called me, you made a choice. Everything after is just execution. He stood, walked to the terrace edge, gestured for her to join him. She did. Together they looked out over the valley where night was settling like a blanket, soft and absolute. First step, Lucian said, you disappear. Not forever. Just long enough that people start asking questions. Long enough that Adrian gets comfortable thinking you've run away in shame. You need to become a ghost. For how long? 3 months. Maybe 4. It'll feel like forever. He glanced at her. Can you do that? Can you vanish from your life and let people think whatever they want about you? She thought about her reputation, her firm, the colleagues who'd respect her less if they thought she'd fled, the clients who might question her strength. Everything she'd built. Then she thought about Adrian's hand on another woman's back. Yes, she said. I can do that. Good. You'll stay here initially. Then we move you through a few other locations, Prague, Vienna, Istanbul, places where we can work without observation. I'll introduce you to people, teach you how to see the world the way I do. By the time you emerge, you'll be someone different. And you'll get what you want from this? Lucien turned to face her fully. What I want is to see what happens when someone like you stops pretending the rules matter. Call it curiosity. Call it investment in a potentially valuable asset. Call it whatever makes you comfortable. I don't need to be comfortable, Serafina said. I need to be effective. Then we'll get along fine. He extended his hand. She looked at it for a long moment, this man she barely knew, this offer that came with no contracts and no guarantees, just a handshake in the Spanish twilight that would change everything. She took it. His grip was firm, final. "Welcome to the shadows, Serafina Vance," he said. "Try not to lose yourself completely." The next morning, she left her phone at the villa and drove back to Barcelona in clothes Lucian's people had provided. Jeans, a simple shirt, no labels, nothing that screamed money. She looked like a tourist, anonymous, forgettable. She parked 6 blocks from the penthouse and walked. The early morning streets were quiet, just delivery trucks and insomniacs, and people whose lives required them to be awake before the city remembered how to breathe. She used the service entrance, took the freight elevator, arrived at the penthouse door with a key she'd carry for another hour, and then throw into the Mediterranean. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Adrian's coffee cup still on the counter, her glass of whiskey in the sink, the jasmine arrangement starting to wilt. She moved through the rooms methodically, took only what mattered, documents, a few photographs, the jewelry her grandmother had left her, left everything else. The designer clothes, the art they'd collected, the furniture they'd chosen together. Let it all become evidence of a ghost. In the bedroom, she found Adrian's laptop open on the desk. He never closed it, too confident in his security systems. She sat down, pulled up his email, and began to read. 30 minutes later, she had what she needed. Not everything, just enough to confirm what she'd suspected, that his business dealings were less clean than they appeared. That Kestrel Corp's meteoric rise had come partially through questionable partnerships and creative accounting. That his public image as a self-made billionaire was exactly that, an image. She didn't copy anything, didn't need to. She had a different kind of memory now, the kind that came with stakes. Instead, she logged out, wiped her fingerprints from the keyboard, and stood. Looked around the bedroom one last time. The bed they'd shared, the windows overlooking Barcelona, the life she was erasing. "Goodbye, Adrian," she said to the empty room. Then she walked out, locked the door behind her, and dropped the key down a storm drain 3 blocks away. The world noticed her absence slowly. First her assistant, when she didn't show up for a Thursday morning meeting. Then her partners at Vance and Meridian, when she missed a client presentation. Then Adrian, when reporters started asking if the betrayed wife had fled. By day 5, it was a story. By day 10, it was a scandal. Speculation ranged from reasonable to absurd. She'd checked into a psychiatric facility, she'd fled to her family estate in Scotland. She'd been seen in Bali, in Morocco, in Iceland. People who claimed to know her gave interviews about her fragile state. Adrian's publicist released a statement expressing concern for her well-being. The narrative wrote itself. The brilliant consultant, undone by her husband's very public betrayal, vanished in shame and heartbreak. "Let them think it," Lucian had said. "Let them build the story they need. The truth will be so much worse." Serafina spent those weeks in places that didn't exist on tourist maps. A renovated monastery in the Czech countryside, a penthouse in Vienna's first district that belonged to no one on paper, a compound outside Istanbul where men with scarred hands taught her things she'd never thought she'd need to know. Not violence, not directly, but the infrastructure of it. How money moved through dark channels, how information became currency, how power worked when you stripped away the pretense of civilization. Lucian was right. She was becoming something else. She learned to read financial documents the way a surgeon read an X-ray, seeing not just the numbers but the disease beneath. Learned to identify the weak points in corporate structures, the places where pressure applied correctly could collapse entire empires. Learned the names of people who didn't have LinkedIn profiles, but who could move mountains with a phone call. And she learned about Lucian. Not everything. He was too careful for that. But enough to understand that his operation wasn't just criminal enterprise. It was an alternate version of everything she'd known. A shadow economy that ran parallel to the legitimate world, sometimes touching it, sometimes diverging completely. He had politicians in his pocket, judges, CEOs, people who owed him favors that would never appear in any ledger. "You're building a network," she said one night in Vienna, sitting in his study while snow fell outside. "I'm maintaining one," he corrected. "My father built it. I just made it more efficient." "Your father?" "Dead 6 years. Heart attack during a negotiation in Moscow." Lucian didn't look up from the documents he was reviewing. Ironic, given how much of his life was spent threatening other people's hearts. You miss him? I miss his clarity. He understood that the world is just force and friction. Everything else is theater. He set down his pen. You're learning that now. Am I? You're here, aren't you? 3 weeks ago, you were planning charity galas and negotiating consulting contracts. Now you're studying offshore account structures and asking questions about leverage points in regulatory systems. That's not learning. That's transformation. She couldn't argue. Every day she spent in this world, the woman she'd been felt more distant. The one who'd believed in rules and fairness and the idea that competence would be rewarded. That woman seemed naive now, weak. Does it bother you, she asked, what you've become? Lucian considered this. I'm not sure I became anything. I think I just stopped pretending to be something else. He looked at her. Same question to you. Serafina thought about Adrian, about the marriage she'd invested in, about the 6 years she'd spent believing partnership mattered. No, she said. It doesn't bother me. Good. Because in 2 weeks, you're going back. That stopped her. Back where? To the world. To Adrian. To everything. He stood, walked to the window. You've been gone long enough. People have settled into their narratives about you. Now we break them. How? He smiled. There's a gala in Madrid. Very exclusive, very public. Adrian will be there with his actress. All the same cameras that caught him the first time. You want me to confront him? No. Lucian turned. I want you to obliterate him, but not emotionally. Not with tears or accusations. With presence. With the message that you didn't break, you evolved. And that evolution came with resources he can't begin to imagine. Understanding dawned cold and clear. You're coming with me. We both are. As a couple. Married, actually. We'll need to make that legal before the event. Just paperwork. But it sends a message. He watched her process this. Does that bother you? It should have. A marriage of convenience to a man she barely knew. A man whose business was fundamentally criminal. A union that existed purely as a weapon. But when she thought about Adrian seeing her arrive on Lucian Droukov's arm, seeing her draped in power instead of shame, no, she said, it doesn't bother me at all. They married in a Prague courthouse on a Tuesday morning. No ceremony, no guests, just paperwork signed in front of a board official who probably processed a dozen similar arrangements every week. When it was done, Lucian handed her a ring, platinum, simple, expensive in its restraint. You don't have to wear it now, he said. She slid it onto her finger. Yes, I do. The next 2 weeks were preparation. Lucien's people moved pieces into place, corporate entities established, investment funds positioned, information gathered, and cataloged. Everything that would be needed when the moment came, and Serafina studied. Every detail of Kestrel Corp's operations, every partnership, every vulnerability. She built a map in her mind of exactly how to dismantle what Adrian had built, where to apply pressure, how to make it look like natural collapse instead of coordinated attack. You're enjoying this, Lucian observed one evening, watching her work. Is that bad? No, just interesting. Most people in your position want revenge to feel righteous. You just want it to be thorough. Righteous doesn't work, Serafina said. Thorough does. The night before Madrid, she stood in front of a mirror in the Vienna penthouse trying on the dress Lucian's people had selected. Obsidian silk, designer but not ostentatious, cut to suggest power rather than sex. She looked like money. Old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Last chance to back out, Lucienne said from the doorway. She met his eyes in the mirror. Are you hoping I will? No, but I wanted to give you the option. He came closer. After tomorrow, there's no pretending this didn't happen. You'll be tied to me publicly. That comes with consequences. I'm counting on it. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, then let's go burn down your old life. The gala in Madrid was exactly what she remembered from a dozen similar events. Champagne and cameras, and people who measured their worth in zeros. They arrived in a convoy of matte black SUVs, an entrance designed to be noticed. When Serafina stepped out onto the red carpet, she heard the cameras before she saw them, that same mechanical shutter sound that had documented her humiliation 3 months ago. This time felt different. She stood straight, Lucien's hand light against her back, not possessive like Adrian's had been on his actress, just present, a statement of alliance. Around them, Lucien's security formed a quiet perimeter, men in tailored suits who didn't need to be threatening to convey threat. The cameras erupted. Questions shouted in 4 languages. Where had she been? Was this her new husband? How did she feel seeing Adrian tonight? She ignored all of it, let Lucien guide her toward the entrance, where she knew, because she'd planned it, that Adrian would be standing with Natalia Sokolov. And there he was. 6 years of marriage condensed into a single moment of recognition. He looked good. Adrian always looked good. That had never been the problem. The tuxedo was perfect, his hair artfully styled, the actress on his arm young and beautiful in a way that photographs well. He saw her. His expression did something complicated, shock maybe, or calculation, or something she couldn't name because she'd stopped trying to read him the moment she'd walked out of their penthouse. Serafina didn't hurry, didn't hesitate, just climbed the stairs at the same measured pace she'd used in 100 boardrooms, Lucien beside her like a shadow made solid. When she reached Adrian, she stopped. The world held its breath. She leaned in, close enough that only he could hear, and said, "Enjoy your throne. It's already burning." Then she continued past him into the gala, leaving him standing there with cameras catching every angle of his face as he processed what she'd just become. Inside, the night unfolded exactly as planned. At Lucien's signal, a brief conversation with a man whose face she didn't recognize, things began to happen. Not dramatically, not obviously, just small shifts in the architecture of Adrian's world. A journalist received an anonymous tip about Kestrel Corp's accounting practices. A regulatory agency that had been sitting on an investigation suddenly found renewed interest. A consortium of investors that didn't exist on paper 3 months ago started buying shares in Adrian's company, quiet and methodical and utterly coordinated. None of it traced back to her. None of it even looked connected. Just a series of unfortunate coincidences that all happened to occur on the same night Adrian Kestrel discovered his ex-wife had married a man whose resources made his look like pocket change. Serafina spent the evening circulating, accepting congratulations on her marriage, deflecting questions about her absence with elegant vagueness. She caught glimpses of Adrian across the ballroom, watching her, trying to understand what had changed, what this meant. He'd figure it out eventually, just not in time to stop it. At midnight, she stepped onto a balcony for air. The Madrid skyline glittered like broken glass. Behind her, the gala continued its performance of civilization, people who thought they were powerful moving through rituals that meant nothing. Lucien joined her, handed her a glass of champagne. "How does it feel, Mutt?" he asked. Serafina considered the question. Thought about the woman who'd stood in a Barcelona kitchen 3 months ago, watching her marriage detonate across every screen. That woman had wanted to understand her options, had believed there was a right way to handle betrayal. This woman knew better. "Like the beginning," she said. Lucien smiled. "Good," because Adrian just left. Looked shaken. I'd give it about 3 hours before he realizes his company's stock started dropping the moment the markets opened in Asia. 3 hours, Serafina repeated. "That's generous. I thought you'd appreciate watching him figure it out slowly." She did. They stood together on the balcony, watching the city breathe, while somewhere below them, Adrian Kestrel's world began its carefully orchestrated collapse. Not all at once. Not obviously. Just a bleeding that would continue until there was nothing left. And when Serafina finally turned to go back inside, back to the gala, and the cameras, and the performance of being someone's wife again, she caught her reflection in the glass doors. The woman looking back was a stranger, cold, precise, capable of things that would keep her awake at night. She smiled at her reflection. Then she walked back into the light, Lucien beside her, and let the cameras capture every angle of the woman she'd become. Adrian found her in her private corridor 2 hours later. No cameras, no witnesses. Just the two of them in a space that smelled like old carpet and expensive regret. "Serafina." His voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. "We need to talk." She turned, looked at him properly for the first time all night. He was disheveled in small ways, tie slightly crooked, jacket unbuttoned, hair touched by anxious fingers, the composed billionaire starting to crack. "Do we?" she said mildly. "What the hell is this?" He gestured vaguely. "Droukov? You married Lucien Droukov? You married an actress. I married a businessman. We both moved on." "Don't." His composure fractured further. "Don't act like those are equivalent. You know what he is, what he does." "Yes," she said. "I do. Better than you know what you are." That landed. She watched him process it, saw the moment he started calculating how much she might know, how much damage she could do. She let him calculate, let the silence stretch. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "Money? Is this about the prenup? Because we can renegotiate. I don't want your money, Adrian." "Then what?" She stepped closer, close enough to smell his cologne, the same scent she'd known for 6 years, close enough to see the fear starting to show beneath the anger. "I want you to understand something," she said quietly. "Every affair you had, every humiliation, every time you made me irrelevant while using my intelligence to build your empire, I documented it, I analyzed it, I turned it into data. That's not—" "I'm not finished." Her voice stayed level, surgical. "The consortium buying Kestrel Corp shares, funded through channels Lucien controls, guided by strategy I designed. The regulatory investigation opening tomorrow, based on information I provided, the board members starting to question your leadership, convinced by evidence I compiled." Adrian's face drained of color. "You can't. The prenup protects your assets in a divorce. We're not getting divorced. We're already divorced. I'm married to someone else. This isn't about legal claims." She smiled. It felt like broken glass. "This is about watching you lose everything the same way I did, publicly, completely, with everyone watching." Serafina. His hand reached for her wrist, the same gesture from 3 months ago. She stepped back. He missed. "Please, we can fix this. We can—" "There's nothing to fix. You forfeited everything the moment you chose her over our partnership." She turned to leave, paused. "Oh, and Adrian? The prenup clause you dismissed? The one about material breach of the marriage contract? My lawyers found precedent. Turns out public humiliation counts. So you won't just lose Kestrel Corp. You'll lose everything we built together too." She walked away, didn't look back. Behind her, she heard him say her name one more time, desperate now, the confidence completely gone. She kept walking. By morning, the collapse was visible. Kestrel Corp's stock had dropped 18% overnight. The regulatory investigation made front pages. 2 board members resigned. Adrian's carefully constructed empire showing its first cracks. Serafina read the news from Lucien's suite in Madrid's most discreet hotel, coffee in hand, while dawn turned the city gold. Beside her, Lucien worked through his own correspondence, unbothered by the chaos they'd unleashed. "Feeling anything?" he asked without looking up. "Should I?" Some people experience guilt at this stage. Doubt. Second thoughts. She considered this. Thought about Adrian's face last night, the fear in his eyes, the realization that the woman he'd dismissed was now the architect of his destruction. "No," she said. "I feel efficient." Lucien smiled. "Good. Because this is just the beginning. The stock drop recovers if we stop now. The investigation stalls if we don't feed it. The board stays loyal if they think he can recover." "Then we don't let him recover." "No," he agreed. "We don't." Her phone buzzed, a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, then saw the country code. Scotland, her family estate. She answered, "Yes?" "Serafina." Her sister's voice, tight with something that might have been concern or might have been judgment. "What have you done?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't. The whole world knows you married Lucien Droukov. Father is furious. Mother won't stop calling, and Adrian's people are claiming you're trying to destroy him out of spite." "Is there a question in there, Claire?" "The question is whether you've lost your mind." Her sister's voice rose. "Droukov isn't like Adrian. He's dangerous, actually dangerous. And you've tied yourself to him to what? Get revenge? It's beneath you." Serafina looked out at Madrid, waking up. Thought about 3 months in the shadows. Thought about learning to see the world the way Lucy did. Thought about the woman she'd been and the woman she was becoming. No, she said quietly. It's exactly where I belong. She ended the call. Lucien glanced up. Family disapproves? Family always disapproves of clarity. Is that what you call this? Clarity? What would you call it? He set down his work, studied her with those dark eyes that missed nothing. I'd call it transformation. The question is whether you can live with who you're becoming. Can you? I was born this way. You weren't. He stood, walked to the window. There's still time to stop. Let the investigation proceed naturally. Take your settlement. Walk away clean. Why would I do that? Because the woman who walked into my villa 3 months ago still had options. The woman sitting here now? He turned. You're committed. Once we finish this, there's no going back to boardrooms and charity galas and pretending the world works according to rules. You'll be someone who destroyed a man. People don't forget that. Serafina set down her coffee, stood, joined him at the window. Good, she said. I don't want them to. Below, Madrid flowed with morning traffic. Normal people. Normal lives. She wondered if she'd ever had that, or if she'd always been headed here, toward this moment, this choice, this version of herself that felt more real than anything that came before. All right, Lucien said. Then let's finish it. How long? 3 more months, maybe 4. By then, Kestrel Corp will be restructured under new ownership. Adrian will be facing criminal charges. His assets frozen, his reputation destroyed. He looked at her. And you'll be standing beside me when it happens, as my wife, as my partner, as someone the world fears just a little. I can live with that. Can you? He moved closer. Because fear is different than respect, and once people fear you, they never really see you as human again. She thought about that, about humanity, about the woman who'd cried in a Barcelona penthouse, about the woman who'd believed marriage meant something. Maybe I don't want to be seen as human, she said. Maybe I want to be seen as inevitable. Lucien smiled. Then we're going to get along fine. The next 3 months moved like clockwork. Every week brought new revelations about Kestrel Corp, accounting irregularities, questionable partnerships, deals that looked different under scrutiny. Nothing explosive, just a steady drip that eroded confidence. Adrian fought back, hired lawyers, made statements, tried to rally his board. It didn't matter, because Serafina had built something better than a scandal. She'd built inevitability. Every move Adrian made to save himself revealed new problems. Every ally he turned to had already been compromised or bought or convinced that supporting him was a losing bet. And through it all, she remained visible. Not hiding, not ashamed. She attended events with Lucien, gave a single interview to a Financial Times reporter she trusted, speaking carefully about moving forward and building new partnerships. Never mentioned Adrian by name. Didn't need to. The world did that for her. From betrayed wife to power player, how Serafina Vance rewrote the rules of revenge. Lucien Droukov's new wife brings strategic brilliance to his empire. The fall of Adrian Kestrel, a case study in hubris. She read the headlines with detachment. They were writing a story about her, but it wasn't quite right, not quite true. But truth didn't matter as much as narrative. Lucien taught her that. In Prague, she met people whose names would never appear in Forbes. Dealt with situations that would never make the news. Learned that the world she'd known was just the surface, and beneath it ran currents of power that made her old life look like theater. She was good at it. Disturbingly good. You're a natural, Lucien said one night in Vienna, after a meeting where she'd negotiated an agreement that would have seemed impossible to the woman she'd been 6 months ago. At what? Criminal enterprise? At seeing systems clearly. At understanding that everything is just leverage and timing. He poured wine. Most people take years to develop that. You walked in with it. Or maybe I always had it and just never had a reason to use it. Maybe, he agreed. Either way, you're wasted on consulting. She didn't disagree. By month 4, Kestrel Corp was in free fall. Stock down 60%, criminal investigation expanding, board in chaos. Adrian made one final attempt to salvage his empire, a desperate press conference where he claimed persecution, conspiracy, betrayal. Serafina watched it from Lucien's Istanbul compound, drink in hand, while rain hammered the windows. Adrian looked diminished, desperate. He named her specifically, claimed she was weaponizing her new marriage to destroy him out of spite, begged for understanding, for mercy. The performance fell flat, because she'd already won the narrative war. She was the brilliant strategist who'd rebuilt her life after betrayal. He was the philandering billionaire facing consequences. No one wanted to be on his side. "Does it feel like you thought it would?" Lucian asked. Serafina watched Adrian's face on screen, watched him crumble in real time, and waited for satisfaction. For closure, for the emotional release that revenge was supposed to bring. It didn't come, just emptiness, and the knowledge that she'd executed a plan perfectly. "No," she admitted, "it feels mechanical." "That's because it is. Revenge is just engineering applied to human weakness. The emotional component is marketing." He turned off the screen. "The question is whether you can live with that." She thought about it, about who she'd been and who she was now, about the coldness that had settled into her bones somewhere between Barcelona and Prague. "I think I already am," she said. Dad. The final collapse happened on a Tuesday in June. Kestrel Corp declared bankruptcy. Adrian was arrested on fraud charges. His assets were frozen pending investigation. The actress who'd been at the center of it all disappeared from public view, her 15 minutes of relevance over. Serafina received the news in Lucian's Prague office, where she now spent most of her time. She'd officially dissolved Vance and Meridian, folded its best consultants into Lucien's operation, repositioned herself entirely. The woman who'd run a legitimate consulting firm was gone. What remained was sharper. "It's done," Lucien said, setting down his phone. "Adrian's lawyers just issued a statement. He's accepting a plea deal. 10 years, probably serve 6 with good behavior. Everything he built is being sold off to cover debts and settlements." Serafina nodded, felt nothing. Just a distant acknowledgement that the objective had been achieved. "You should feel something," Lucien observed. "You just destroyed a billionaire. That usually comes with emotion." "Should it?" "Most people think so." She looked out at Prague's old town, centuries of architecture that had survived revolutions and wars and systems rising and falling. Wondered if any of those earlier residents had felt what she felt now, this odd combination of power and emptiness. "I think I feel free," she said finally. "Free from what?" "From pretending it matters, marriage, partnership, the idea that playing by rules gets you anywhere." She turned. "You were right. That woman who walked into your villa, she died. This is what replaced her." Lucian studied her for a long moment. "And you're okay with that? Are you?" "I'm not the one who lost something." "Didn't I gain something too?" She gestured at the office, at the empire they'd built together. "You said it yourself. I'm wasted on consulting. Now I'm not wasted. I'm exactly where I should be." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe you traded one cage for another." That gave her pause. "Do you think that?" "I think you married me for revenge and access to power. I think you're very good at what we do. I think you've become someone your former self wouldn't recognize." He moved closer. "What I don't know is whether you chose this or if circumstances chose it for you. Does it matter?" "It might, eventually." She thought about that, about choice, about the moment she'd called Lucien from a Barcelona street corner, about every decision that had followed. "I chose it," she said. "Every step, every transformation, I chose to stop being the woman who believed rules mattered and become the woman who writes her own. Then I guess we're both exactly where we want to be." They were. The empire Adrian built became something else, parceled out, restructured, absorbed by people who knew how to run it better. Serafina helped with the dissolution, applying the same strategic mind that had once built it to taking it apart efficiently. And somewhere in a minimum security facility, Adrian Kestrel served his sentence, watching the world move on without him. Serafina never visited, didn't write, didn't think about him except in terms of lessons learned and mistakes not to repeat. He became data, a case study, evidence of what happened when you underestimated the wrong person. Nothing more. Droukov. 6 months after Adrian's arrest, Serafina stood on the terrace of Lucian's villa in Spain, the same place where this had started. The olive groves were heavy with fruit, the fountains still ran. Nothing had changed except her. Lucien joined her with wine, The same ritual as before. Regrets? He asked. She considered this honestly, thought about the life she'd had, the woman she'd been, the marriage that had seemed like partnership until it wasn't. No, she said, just observations. Such as? Such as revenge gave me power, but it also bound me to this world, to you, to operating in shadows. She looked at him. That's not a complaint, just a fact. Facts are good, he agreed. Better than delusions. Is that what I had before? Delusions? You tell me. You believed a man like Adrian Kestrel could be a partner. That's either optimism or delusion. She smiled despite herself. Fair point. They drank in comfortable silence. The sun set over Spanish hills the same way it had 6 months ago, indifferent to human drama. What now? Lucien asked eventually. Now we keep building, keep operating, keep being inevitable. That's it? No plans to return to legitimate business, to rebuild your reputation? My reputation is fine, just different. She turned to face him. People fear me now. You said they would. You were right. And you're okay with that? I'm efficient with that. She set down her glass. Which is better than okay. Lucien studied her in the dying light. You know, when you first called me, I thought you'd break. Thought the process of becoming this... He gestured at her, at everything she'd become, would destroy you or at least damage you beyond use. And you're not broken. You're not even damaged. You're just colder. He said it without judgment, just observation. That's rare. Is that good? For me? Yes. For you? He shrugged. Time will tell. She thought about that. About time. About the woman she'd continue becoming. About whether cold was the same as strong or just a different kind of armor. I can live with cold, she said finally. Good, because the world we operate in doesn't have room for warm. He was right. And as Serafina Vance stood on that terrace, watching night claim the Spanish countryside, she felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, not satisfaction, just acceptance. She'd destroyed a man who'd destroyed her. She'd built power from betrayal. She'd chosen to become inevitable. And if that came with a cost, if she'd lost something human in the process, well, she'd gained something more useful. She'd gained herself. Whatever that meant now. The cracks started small. 3 weeks after Adrian's arrest, Serafina sat in Lucien's Prague office reviewing financial documents when her phone lit up with a name she hadn't seen in months. Margaret Reeves, the lawyer who'd told her she had no leverage, back when she still believed in legal solutions. She let it ring twice before answering. Margaret, Miss Vance, or is it Mrs. Droukov now? The lawyer's voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. Professional distance replaced by something harder. Either works. What do you need? I need to understand what you've done. Paper shuffled on the other end. I have 3 former clients of yours sitting in my office. They're asking questions about Vance and Meridian's dissolution, about where their retainer fees went, about whether you had conflicts of interest while you were still operating as their consultant. Serafina felt something cold settle in her stomach. She kept her voice level. The firm was dissolved legally. All active contracts were transferred or terminated with proper notice. Client funds were returned or reallocated according to existing agreements. That's what the paperwork says. But the timing is interesting, isn't it? You dissolve your firm the same week your husband's company starts buying Kestrel Corp assets. You terminate contracts with clients who had business relationships with Adrian. You restructure everything right as he's going down. Margaret paused. It looks coordinated. It was coordinated. I coordinated it. That's not what I mean, and you know it. The lawyer's tone sharpened. Did you use client information to target Adrian? Did you leverage privileged knowledge from your consulting work to build your case against him? No. Can you prove that? Serafina looked out at Prague's morning light, thinking through the moves she'd made, the information she'd used, the lines she might have crossed without noticing. Why are you calling me, Margaret? If your clients have complaints, they should file them formally. They will. I'm giving you advance warning because 6 months ago you sat in my office looking for options. I respected that. But this? She exhaled hard. This looks like you weaponized your entire professional network to destroy one man, and that makes people nervous, makes them wonder what you might do if they get on your wrong side. Good, Serafina said. They should wonder. That's not the response I was hoping for. What were you hoping for? Remorse? Apology? She stood, walked to the window. I did what I needed to do. If that makes people nervous, they're paying attention. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted. Less lawyer, more human. What happened to you, Serafina? The woman I met 6 months ago was brilliant, but measured. Careful. This person I'm talking to now sounds like... Like what? Like someone who's forgotten that actions have consequences beyond the immediate target. I haven't forgotten anything. I've just stopped pretending consequences matter more than results. That's what scares me, Margaret said quietly. That's exactly what scares me. The call ended. Serafina stood at the window for a long time, phone dead in her hand, watching Prague wake up below. People going to work, living normal lives, operating in a world where consequences still mattered, where reputation could be rebuilt, where mistakes didn't follow you forever. She wasn't in that world anymore. Lucien appeared in the doorway. Problem? Maybe. She turned. Former clients asking questions, wondering if I used their information against Adrian. Did you? Not directly, but the lines were blurry. Lines are always blurry, that's why they exist, to be crossed when necessary. He came into the room, closed the door. Are you worried? She considered this, tried to locate worry inside herself, and found only a cold assessment of risk versus reward. I'm concerned about exposure. If clients start digging, they might find connections we'd rather keep quiet. Then we contain it, make the questions expensive to ask, make the answers dangerous to pursue. He said it casually, like discussing lunch plans. I have people who handle this kind of thing. That's not... She stopped, breathed, tried to find the woman who would have been horrified by that suggestion. Couldn't locate her. What kind of people? The kind who convince nervous clients that their concerns are better left unvoiced, not through violence, through leverage. Everyone has something they'd prefer stayed private. We just remind them of that fact. That's extortion. That's business. He studied her. Unless you'd prefer a different approach. We could go legitimate, hire lawyers, file countercomplaints, drag everything into public record. But that requires explaining exactly how you knew what you knew about Adrian. And I don't think that explanation helps either of us. He was right. She knew he was right. But there was something viscerally wrong about threatening people who'd done nothing except ask reasonable questions, people who'd been her clients, her professional network. I need to think about it, she said. Don't think too long. The longer questions sit unanswered, the more dangerous they become. He left her alone. Serafina sat at the desk, pulled up files on the 3 clients Margaret had mentioned, knew their businesses intimately. She'd consulted for all of them, helped restructure operations, advised on expansion strategies. Good people, smart people, people who trusted her. Now they were liabilities. The realization sat in her chest like a stone. 6 months ago, these were professional relationships she valued. Now she was calculating how to silence them. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow? Claire, her sister, who'd called her crazy 6 months ago, who'd sided with family disapproval over sisterly support, who represented everything about her old life that felt increasingly distant. She almost deleted it, then typed back, Where? The response came immediately. The usual place. 10 a.m. Come alone. Pastet. The cafe sat in Prague's Old Town, tucked into a medieval street that tourists photographed but rarely explored. Serafina arrived 15 minutes early, took a corner table with a view of the entrance, ordered espresso she wouldn't drink. Claire walked in at 9:58 wearing business casual and an expression Serafina recognized from childhood, the look that meant their mother had sent her on a mission. You're punctual, Serafina said as her sister sat. You're paranoid. I asked you to come alone, not case the location like a spy. Claire ordered tea from a passing waiter, then turned back with eyes that looked tired. How are you? Is that a real question or an opening move? Can it be both? Serafina sat back, studied her sister properly. They'd never been close, too different, too competitive, too shaped by family dynamics that rewarded achievement over affection. Claire had gone the legitimate route: law school, marriage to a banker, 2 children, a house in Edinburgh, safe choices, approved choices. "I'm fine," Serafina said. "How's the family?" "Concerned. Father saw the news about Adrian's arrest. Mother keeps asking when you're coming home for a visit. The aunts are convinced you've been brainwashed by some European crime syndicate." Claire's mouth twitched. "I told them that was ridiculous. You're far too smart to be brainwashed." "Just crazy enough to marry into one voluntarily?" "Your words, not mine." The tea arrived. Claire added honey with precise movements. "Is that what happened? Did you marry Lucien Droukov voluntarily, or was that part of some agreement you couldn't refuse?" "I married him because he gave me what I needed." "Which was?" "The ability to destroy Adrian completely." Claire's spoon stopped mid-stir. She set it down carefully. "That's chilling. That's honest." "It's both." Her sister looked at her like she was trying to locate someone familiar beneath the surface. "Do you hear yourself? 6 months ago, you were a consultant. Successful, respected, building something legitimate. Now you're, what, a crime lord's wife? Adrian's destroyer? What exactly are you, Serafina?" "I'm someone who stopped playing by rules that only apply to people without power." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." Claire drank her tea, buying time, clearly running through whatever speech she'd prepared. Finally, "Mother wants you to come home, not for a visit, permanently. She thinks if you're away from Lucian's influence, you'll remember who you really are." "Who I really am," Serafina repeated. "The obedient daughter? The brilliant consultant who accepted her husband's very public betrayal with grace? The woman who followed all the rules and still lost? The woman who had options that didn't involve becoming something you'll regret?" "I don't regret anything." "Not yet." Claire leaned forward. "But you will, because this path you're on, it only goes one direction. You can't come back from this, can't rebuild your reputation, can't return to legitimate business, can't ever be trusted again by people who operate in daylight." "Maybe I don't want to operate in daylight." "Then you're lost." Her sister's voice cracked slightly. "And I'm supposed to sit here and pretend that's fine, that my sister didn't disappear into some European underworld and emerge as someone I don't recognize?" Serafina felt something twist in her chest, ignored it. "What do you want from me, Claire? An apology? Permission to tell Mother you tried? Assurance that I'll come home and be good? I want you to admit you're in over your head, that marrying Lucien Droukov wasn't strategy, it was desperation, that you're terrified of what you've become but too proud to ask for help." Claire's eyes were wet now. "I want my sister back." "Your sister is sitting right here." "No, you're someone wearing her face." Claire stood abruptly, tea half finished. "But fine, if you want to pretend this is who you always were, that's your choice. Just know that when this falls apart, and it will fall apart, don't expect family to catch you. We tried. You refused." She left. Serafina sat alone with cold espresso and the weight of her sister's words settling like ash. Around her, the cafe continued its quiet business. Students studying, couples talking, normal people with normal problems. She didn't belong here anymore. Wasn't sure she ever had. That night, she found Lucien in his study, surrounded by documents and the kind of silence that meant he was working through a problem. He looked up when she entered. "How was coffee with your sister?" "How did you—" She stopped. Of course he knew. He probably had someone watching to make sure it was safe. "It was fine." Fine meaning productive, or fine meaning you argued? Both. She poured herself whiskey from the bar cart, feeling the ritual's comfort. "She thinks I'm lost, that I've become someone unrecognizable." "Have you?" "I don't know." The honesty surprised her. 6 months ago, I would have said no. Now I'm not sure what I am. Lucien set down his papers. "Sit." She did, taking the chair across from his desk. The study was all dark wood and older money, the kind of room that had seen generations of quiet decisions that shaped louder worlds. "You want to know what I think?" he said. "Do I?" "I think you're experiencing the aftermath of transformation. You burned down your old life very efficiently, destroyed a man, rebuilt yourself into something harder, but you didn't give yourself time to grieve what you lost in the process. I didn't lose anything worth keeping. You lost the belief that you could be both powerful and good. That's not nothing. He poured his own drink. Most people never have to choose. They stay comfortable in their limitations. But you got forced into a choice. Stay weak and victimized or become strong and ruthless. You chose strength. Now you're discovering that strength comes with a price. Which is? Isolation. Fear from people who used to trust you. Questions about who you really are. He drank. And the knowledge that you can never go back, because the person you were before doesn't exist anymore. The words hit harder than she expected. She looked into her whiskey, seeing her reflection fragmented in the liquid. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Becoming what you are. Every day. That surprised her. Then why do it? Because the alternative was being what my father wanted, a different kind of cage. At least this cage I built myself. He met her eyes. Same question to you. Do you regret it? Serafina thought about Adrian in prison, about her sister's disappointment, about Margaret's concern, about the clients asking questions she couldn't answer honestly. I regret that it was necessary, she said finally, but not that I did it. Good answer. Honest. He stood, came around the desk. But it doesn't solve your immediate problem, which is your former clients, the questions, the exposure risk. He pulled up a file on his tablet, turned it toward her. I had my people look into it. The 3 asking questions, 2 of them have vulnerabilities we can leverage. The 3rd is cleaner, just genuinely concerned about professional ethics. She looked at the file, saw information she recognized, business dealings, personal matters, the kind of details that lived in shadows, information that could destroy careers if weaponized. You want me to threaten them, she said. I want you to protect us both. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Threats are emotional. Protection is strategic. We're not doing this to punish them for asking questions. We're doing it because those questions lead to exposure, and exposure leads to legal complications we'd both prefer to avoid. That's rationalization. That's survival. He closed the tablet. But I won't make you do it. If you want to handle this differently, hire lawyers, fight it out publicly, risk everything coming to light, that's your choice. I'll support it either way. She believed him. That was the strange part. Lucien would support her even if it cost him, because their partnership was based on something more fundamental than convenience. But that didn't make the choice easier. I need time, she said. You have 24 hours. After that, the questions get louder and the answers get messier. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she walked Prague's empty streets, watching the city breathe in the hours when only cleaners and insomniacs witnessed its truths. The ancient architecture stood indifferent to her crisis, having survived centuries of people making harder choices than hers. Somewhere around 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. An email from an address she didn't recognize, subject line blank. She almost deleted it, then saw the sender's name in the metadata, Adrian. Her thumb hovered over delete, then pressed open. Serafina, I know you won't respond to this, probably won't even read it, but I need to say it anyway, even if it's just screaming into a void. You won. I'm in prison. My company's gone. My reputation's destroyed. Everything I built is ashes. You executed a perfect takedown. I'd congratulate you if I wasn't the target. But here's what I can't figure out. Was it worth it? Whatever you paid to make this happen, whatever you had to become to pull it off, was destroying me worth that cost. Because from where I'm sitting, we both lost. You just lost something harder to quantify. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not even asking you to feel guilty. You're probably incapable of that now. I'm just asking you to be honest with yourself about what you traded to get your revenge. You married a man who makes me look like a saint. You aligned yourself with an organization that operates in spaces I never had the stomach for. You became exactly the kind of person I feared you'd become if you ever stopped believing the rules mattered. I made you irrelevant for 6 years. You made me irrelevant forever. But in the process, you made yourself into something irrelevant too, just in a different way. Congratulations. We're both ghosts now. Adrian. She read it 3 times, standing under a streetlight in Old Town while the night pressed close, waited for anger, for satisfaction, for vindication, felt only a hollow recognition that he might be right, not about deserving forgiveness, he didn't, not about her being wrong, she wasn't, but about the cost, about what she'd traded. She'd destroyed a man and lost herself in the process. Or maybe found herself. She still couldn't tell which. At dawn, she returned to Lucian's apartment, found him already awake and working. He looked up when she entered. "Decision?" he asked. "Handle the clients quietly. Use leverage if necessary, but no permanent damage. Just enough to make them stop asking questions." "Done." No judgment in his voice. No approval either. Just acknowledgement. "You okay?" "No." She sat down, feeling exhaustion in her bones. "But I will be. That's what everyone says before they break." "I'm not breaking." "Not yet," he agreed. "But you're fracturing. I can see it. Your sister sees it. Even Adrian sees it, apparently. I had someone intercept his email. Wanted to make sure it wasn't a threat before it reached you." "You read my mail?" "I read mail from convicted felons to my wife. There's a difference." He set down his work. "What did he say?" "That I traded something essential to destroy him. That we're both ghosts now." She looked at Lucien. "Is he right? About the first part?" "Probably. About the second?" Lucien considered. "Ghosts are powerless. You're not, so no. But I'm not what I was. Nothing stays what it was. Everything transforms or dies. You just transformed faster than most." He came around the desk. "The question isn't whether you changed. It's whether you can live with what you changed into." "Everyone keeps asking me that." "Because it's the only question that matters." She stood, went to the window, watched Prague's morning commute begin. All those people going to jobs, living lives, operating in a world with clear rules and consequences. A world she'd left behind. "I can live with it," she said finally. "I just need to stop expecting it to feel good." "It never does. Anyone who tells you revenge feels good is lying or broken. It just feels necessary." He joined her at the window. "But necessary doesn't mean wrong. Doesn't mean right either." "No," he agreed. "It just means done." The clients went quiet within 48 hours. Serafina didn't ask what leverage was used, didn't want to know. Just noticed the absence of questions, the withdrawal of complaints, the sudden lack of interest in pursuing concerns about professional ethics. Margaret called once more, voice tight with something that might have been fear or might have been disgust. "Whatever you did, it worked. My clients don't want to pursue this anymore." "Good," Serafina said. "That's all you have to say. Good? What else is there?" "An explanation, an acknowledgement that you just crossed a line you can't uncross." Margaret's voice shook slightly. "I defended you, Serafina. When people said you'd become dangerous, I argued that you were just protecting yourself. Now I don't know what you are." "Does it matter?" "It matters to me. 'Cause 6 months ago I respected you, wanted to help you. Now I'm just afraid of you." A pause. "Is that what you wanted? For people to be afraid?" Serafina thought about that. About fear versus respect. About power versus connection. "I wanted people to understand I'm not someone who can be dismissed," she said finally. "If that requires fear, then yes." "That's sad. That's strategic." "They're not mutually exclusive." Margaret sighed. "I'm terminating our professional relationship. Not because I think you're wrong. I honestly don't know anymore. But because I can't represent someone I'm afraid of. It compromises my judgment." "I understand." "Do you? Do you understand that every relationship you had before this, professional, personal, familial, is being recalibrated around fear? That you're building an empire on people being too scared to challenge you? That's how empires work." "God help you," Margaret said quietly, "because nobody else can." The line went dead. Serafina sat with that for a long time, thought about her sister's tears, about Adrian's email, about Margaret's fear, about the accumulating weight of people who used to know her and now didn't. Lucien found her an hour later, still sitting in the same position. "You've been crying," he observed. She touched her face, surprised to find it wet. Hadn't noticed. "I didn't realize." "That's worse than realizing." He sat beside her. "Want to talk about it?" "What's there to say?" I'm systematically destroying every relationship I had before you, replacing connection with fear, becoming exactly what everyone warned me I'd become. And I can't stop. Because stopping means being vulnerable again, means going back to being someone who can be hurt, and I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't do that again. He pulled her against him. She went rigid, then slowly relaxed, letting herself be held while something inside her broke that had been bending for months. You're allowed to regret the cost without regretting the choice, Lucien said into her hair. They're separate things. Are they? Yes. You can mourn what you lost and still know you made the right decision. Both can be true. She wanted to believe that, wanted to think she could hold both truths simultaneously, that destroying Adrian was necessary and that becoming what she'd become was a tragedy. But the truths felt incompatible, like matter and antimatter waiting to annihilate each other. What if I can't live with both? She whispered. Then you choose which one matters more and build your life around that. He pulled back, looked at her. But you don't get to choose neither. That's not an option anymore. Why not? Because you already made irreversible choices, already crossed lines, already became someone the world fears. You can't unmake that by wishing it away. The finality of it hit like a physical blow. He was right. 6 months ago, she'd had options: divorce, settlement, rebuilding. Now she had only forward momentum into darker spaces. I hate this, she said. I know. I hate that you're right. I know that too. They sat in silence while Prague moved outside the window, indifferent to human suffering. After a long time, Serafina pulled away, wiped her face with mechanical efficiency. The clients are handled? She asked. Yes, and there's no blowback. Not that we can see. Good. She stood, smoothed her clothes, rebuilt the armor that had cracked. Then we move forward. Just like that? Just like that. She looked at him. Because you're right, I don't get to choose neither, so I choose necessary over comfortable, power over connection, fear over love. That's bleak. That's survival. Lucienne studied her with an expression she couldn't read. You know, when this started, I thought I was getting a strategist, someone brilliant and cold who could help me expand my operations. But you're more complicated than that. Is that good or bad? I don't know yet. He stood. But it's interesting, and in this world, interesting is more valuable than good. 3 days later, everything changed. Serafina was reviewing financial projections when Lucien's head of security appeared, a man named Victor who'd been with him for 15 years and radiated competence like heat. He never interrupted work unless something was critically wrong. We have a problem, Victor said without preamble. Lucien looked up. Define problem. Someone's been asking questions. Not about Serafina's clients, about her. Specifically, about her movements over the past 6 months, the places she stayed, the people she met, the timeline of her involvement with you. Cold flooded Serafina's system. Who? We don't know yet. The inquiries are coming through intermediaries, professional ones, intelligence contractors probably. Someone with resources. Adrian? Serafina asked, though she knew it didn't make sense. He was in prison. Assets frozen, capability neutralized. No, this is too sophisticated for him, and too recent, started 3 days ago, right after your client situation resolved. Victor looked at Lucien. Someone's building a file. Question is why? Lucien's face went cold in a way Serafina had never seen. Run full background on every person who knows about our arrangement. Cross-reference with anyone who might benefit from exposing it. Check for leaks in our network. Already running. Victor hesitated. There's something else. What? The questions aren't just about Serafina, they're about the marriage. Specifically, whether it's legitimate or strategic, whether it constitutes fraud for any legal purpose. Like someone's trying to build a case that you two falsified your relationship for criminal purposes. The implications crystallized instantly. A fraudulent marriage could invalidate every protection that relationship provided, could expose both of them to legal challenges, could unravel everything they'd built. How long do we have? Lucien asked. Unknown. Depends on who's asking and what they plan to do with the information. But based on the pattern of inquiries, they're getting close to a complete picture. Then we need to move faster. Lucien stood. Double the security on Serafina. Lock down all communications and find out who's asking before they finish asking. Victor left. Serafina and Lucien looked at each other across the desk. This is because of the clients, she said. We pushed too hard, made too much noise. Someone noticed. Maybe. Or maybe this was always coming and the timing's coincidental. He came around the desk. Either way, we need to assume the worst, that someone knows our marriage was strategic, has documentation to prove it, and plans to use that against us. Who would benefit from that? Lots of people. Adrian's former allies wanting revenge, competitors wanting to destabilize me, law enforcement building a case. Take your pick. He gripped her shoulders. But here's what matters. We need to make the marriage look real. Not just legally real, but emotionally real. We need to eliminate any evidence that this was calculated. How? We have 6 months of living parallel lives, separate rooms, professional distance. Anyone investigating will see that. Then we change the narrative starting now. We become convincing. We act like a couple who fell in love under extreme circumstances. We build a story that's more compelling than the truth. That's survival, he finished. Same thing you chose 3 days ago, just applied differently. She wanted to argue, wanted to say there had to be another way. But she could see the logic, cold, clean, inevitable. Their strategic marriage was a liability. A real marriage was protection. What does that look like practically? She asked. It looks like you move into my bedroom. It looks like we appear together publicly as an actual couple, not a business arrangement. It looks like we give interviews about how we fell in love. It looks like we become convincing enough that any investigation concludes we're legitimate. And if we're not convincing, his hands tightened on her shoulders, then everything falls apart, for both of us. The weight of it settled like concrete. She'd married this man for revenge and access. Now she had to make it look like love or lose everything. Okay, she said. Where do we start? We start by understanding that from this moment forward, we're being watched. Every interaction is potentially documented. Every word might be recorded. Every choice we make either supports the narrative or undermines it. So we perform. We live it. There's a difference. He pulled her closer. This isn't about acting. It's about becoming so convincing that we convince ourselves. Because the best lies are the ones the liars believe. She looked up at him. This man who'd given her the tools to destroy her enemy, who'd taught her to see power clearly, who'd become the strangest kind of partner she'd ever had. Not husband, not lover. Something else entirely. Now he was asking her to make it look like all the things it wasn't. I don't know how to fake this kind of thing, she admitted. Neither do I. But we're both smart. We'll figure it out. And if we don't, then we'll fail together, which is more than most marriages can say. Despite everything, she almost smiled. That's bleak. That's honest. He released her shoulders, stepped back. Pack your things. You're moving into the master bedroom tonight. We start building the performance immediately. Lucien. What? She wanted to ask if this bothered him. If becoming convincing meant risking something real. If pretending to care might make him actually care. But the questions felt too vulnerable, too revealing of her own uncertainty. Nothing, she said. I'll pack. That night she stood in the master bedroom surrounded by her belongings, feeling like an actor preparing for a role she hadn't auditioned for. The room was elegant, all dark woods and expensive fabrics, but it was his space, his territory. Moving in felt like crossing a threshold she hadn't planned to cross. Lucien appeared in the doorway. You don't have to do this. You just said I did. I said we need to appear married. I didn't say you had to actually live in here if it makes you uncomfortable. We can stage it for anyone watching, and you can sleep elsewhere. She looked at him, trying to understand the offer. That defeats the purpose. If we're being surveilled, they'll notice. Maybe. But there's performing, and there's violating your own boundaries. I won't ask you to do the latter. The consideration surprised her. 6 months of partnership, and he still found ways to be unexpectedly decent about small things. I'll stay, she said. We need to be convincing. Half measures don't work. All right. He came into the room, began helping her unpack with an efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. For someone. In some other life. They worked in silence, building a shared space from separate existences. her clothes next to his in the closet, her books on the nightstand, her presence bleeding into his territory until the room belonged to neither of them individually. When it was done, they stood looking at what they'd created, a bedroom that looked lived in by two people, evidence of marriage, proof of intimacy, all of it performance. "This is strange," Serafina said. "Which part?" "All of it. Pretending to be something we're not because the truth is too complicated to defend. Welcome to my entire life." He sat on the bed, started unlacing his shoes. "Every interaction I have is performance. Every relationship is strategic. The only difference is now you're doing it too." "Doesn't it exhaust you?" "Constantly. But it's better than the alternative." "Which is?" "Being vulnerable. Letting people see the truth." He looked up at her. "You know what happens when people see the truth about people like us? They use it. They weaponize it. They turn our humanity into leverage." "So we just never let anyone see?" "Not anyone who matters, no. Not anyone who could hurt us." She thought about that. About Adrian seeing her vulnerability and using it. About her sister seeing her transformation and retreating. About everyone who'd known her before and couldn't recognize what she'd become. "What about each other?" she asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Lucian finished with his shoes, set them aside with careful precision. "What about us? Do we keep performing for each other, or is there some version of this where we're honest?" He considered this for a long time. "I don't know. I've never had a partnership like this before. Someone who knows what I am and chose it anyway. Most people in my life are either employees or assets or threats. You're none of those things." "What am I then?" "I'm still figuring that out." He stood. "But for now, you're someone I trust not to use my truth as a weapon. That's rare enough to be valuable." It wasn't a declaration of affection, wasn't even friendship really, but it was honest in a way that felt more intimate than any performance could be. "Same," she said. "I trust you not to weaponize my truth." "Good. Then maybe we can build something real inside the performance. Or maybe we'll just become more convincing liars." "That too," he agreed. "But convincing liars who trust each other, that's something." They prepared for bed with the awkwardness of strangers sharing space for the first time. She changed in the bathroom. He turned off lights. They navigated around each other with careful politeness until finally they were both in bed, a careful distance between them in the darkness. "Serafina?" Lucian's voice came through the dark. "Yes?" "If this gets too uncomfortable, the performance, the proximity, any of it, tell me. We'll find another way." "There is no other way. You said it yourself. This is survival." "There's always another way. It's just usually worse." She thought about that. About choosing between bad options and worse ones. About the accumulation of compromises that had led her to this moment. Lying in bed with a man she barely knew, pretending to be his wife to protect them both from exposure. "I'll tell you," she said finally. "If it gets too much." "Good." Silence fell. Outside, Prague breathed its ancient rhythms. Inside, two people who'd married for strategy tried to become convincing at something they'd never intended to feel. Somewhere in the dark, Serafina heard Lucian's breathing even out into sleep. She lay awake longer, thinking about performance and truth, about what was real and what was necessary, about whether there was any difference anymore. Eventually, exhaustion took her. She dreamed of Adrian's face in the courthouse, of her sister's tears, of Margaret's fear, of every person who'd looked at her and seen something they didn't recognize. In the dream, she kept trying to explain that she was still herself, just transformed, just necessary. But the words came out in a language no one understood. Buffing. Morning came with Victor's face on the bedroom screen, the emergency communication system Lucian had installed for urgent situations. "We found who's asking questions," Victor said without preamble. "You're not going to like it." Lucian sat up immediately, fully alert. Serafina followed more slowly, pulling a robe around herself. "Show me," Lucian said. Victor's screen split. On one side, surveillance footage of a woman in her 50s entering a building in London. On the other, a dossier. Serafina's stomach dropped. "That's Catherine Oakes," she said. I know who she is." Lucian's voice had gone flat. "Dangerous. She's MI6, Organized Crime Division. She's been trying to build a case against me for 3 years. She's also my mother's oldest friend, Serafina finished. They went to university together. She's been to every family event for the past 30 years. They looked at each other, understanding crystallizing like ice. Your family contacted her, Lucian said. Probably your mother. Concerned about you marrying a known criminal. Asked her friend to look into it, make sure you were safe. And Catherine's using it as an excuse to investigate you. She gets to help an old friend and build her case simultaneously. Efficient. Lucien's jaw was tight and devastating. Because now we're not just dealing with random inquiries. We're dealing with someone who has government resources, personal motivation, and legal authority to dig as deep as she wants. Victor's face reappeared on screen. There's more. She's been coordinating with Europol, building a coalition of agencies interested in your operations. The marriage investigation is just the entry point. She's using it to justify broader surveillance. How long until she has enough to move? Lucian asked. Maybe weeks, maybe days if she finds the right evidence. Victor paused. If she proves the marriage is fraudulent, she can invalidate every legal protection it provided, every asset transfer, every business decision made under its umbrella. She can unravel everything back to the beginning. Serafina felt the walls closing in. Her family's concern had become a weapon. Her mother's attempt to protect her had triggered an investigation that could destroy everything. We need to tell them, she said. My family. They don't understand what they've done. If I explain, no. Lucian's voice was hard. The moment you contact your family about this, it confirms we have something to hide. Catherine will know we're onto her investigation. We lose any advantage we might have. So we just let them keep feeding her information? We let them think they're helping you while we build our defenses. He turned to Victor, full counterintelligence protocol. I want to know every move Catherine makes, every person she talks to, every piece of evidence she's gathering. If she breathes wrong, I want to know about it. Already running. Victor's face showed strain. But Lucienne, she's good. One of the best I've seen. She won't make mistakes we can exploit. Then we don't exploit mistakes. We create them. Lucian stood, began pacing. She's building a case around our marriage being fraudulent. So we give her evidence to the contrary. We become so convincing that her investigation finds nothing except a legitimate relationship. That was already the plan, Serafina said. No, the plan was to appear married. Now we need to be married. Actually, completely. No more separate existences. No more professional distance. We need to build 6 months of retroactive evidence that we fell in love. That's impossible. You can't retroactively create evidence. You can if you're creative. He stopped pacing, looked at her with something sharp and calculating. We start telling a story about how we met years ago at that Vienna conference, how we stayed in touch, how when your marriage fell apart, I was the one you called because I'd always understood you in ways Adrian never did. How our marriage was fast but legitimate because we'd been building toward it for years. That's a lie. Yes, but it's a believable lie. And we can support it with digital footprints created now but backdated appropriately. Emails, text messages, photos we take now but claim are from then. He was moving faster now, pieces falling into place. We build a love story compelling enough to withstand investigation. Serafina felt something twist in her chest. You want to falsify our entire relationship history. I want to survive. This is how. By lying to intelligence services, by fabricating evidence, by doing what's necessary. He came close, gripped her shoulders the way he had yesterday. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know you married me for revenge, not for this. But circumstances changed. Catherine Oakes changed them. Now we adapt or we fall. She looked up at him, seeing the fear beneath his calculation. Lucien Droukov, untouchable crime lord, was scared. Because this time the threat came from inside the system, from someone with legal authority to destroy them both. If we do this, she said slowly, if we create false evidence of a relationship and they discover it's false, the consequences are worse than if we'd done nothing. Yes. We could both end up in prison. Yes. And you're willing to take that risk? I'm willing to take any risk that gives us a chance of survival. Are you? The question hung between them like a blade. 6 months ago, she'd walked into Lucien's villa wanting revenge, had made choices she couldn't unmake, had crossed lines she couldn't recross. Now she stood at another threshold: falsify evidence or face exposure, commit to the lie or accept destruction. "I need to think," she said. "You have until noon. Catherine's investigation moves fast. If we're going to build our counter-narrative, we need to start immediately." He released her shoulders, stepped back, gave her space to breathe. Serafina walked to the window, looked out at Prague's morning light, and tried to find solid ground in a world that had become entirely quicksand. Behind her, she heard Lucien on the phone with Victor, already building contingencies, already moving forward with the plan, whether she agreed or not, because that's what survival looked like in his world: constant motion, constant adaptation, constant willingness to do whatever came next. She thought about her mother, about Catherine Oakes sitting in London right now, building a case she thought would save Serafina from a dangerous man, about family love twisted into legal weapons. Thought about Adrian in prison, reading about her marriage and knowing it was revenge dressed as romance. Thought about her sister's tears and Margaret's fear and every person who'd looked at her with disappointment or confusion or worry. Thought about the choice in front of her: commit fully to this world or try to find a way back to the one she'd left. But there was no way back. There had never been a way back. The moment she'd called Lucien 6 months ago, she'd made her choice. Everything after was just accepting the consequences. "Noon," she said, turning from the window. "You said I have until noon?" "Yes." "Then at noon, I'll give you my answer. And if the answer is no?" She met his eyes. "Then you'll do what you have to do, and I'll do what I have to do, and we'll see which of us survives." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or respect. Fair enough. She left the bedroom, left him on the phone, left the window and its view of Prague's ancient streets, walked through halls of his apartment that had become her prison or her castle. She still couldn't tell which. Found herself in a room they never used, full of furniture covered in sheets, full of possibilities never explored. Sat on a covered chair and tried to remember who she'd been before all of this. But that woman felt like a stranger. Someone naive and hopeful and wrong about how the world worked. Someone who believed rules mattered. Someone who thought love was real and power was earned through merit. Someone who'd never had to choose between self-preservation and truth. That woman was dead. The woman who remained had different rules. And when noon came, Serafina Droukov now, walked back into that master bedroom and looked at the man she'd married for revenge and said the only thing that made sense anymore: "We build the lie. We make it perfect. We become so convincing that even we believe it." Lucien nodded once. "Good. Then let's burn the truth and build something better." And somewhere in London, Catherine Oakes opened a new file on her computer, typed in 2 names, Serafina Vance and Lucien Droukov, and began building the case that would either destroy them both or prove that some lies were strong enough to become truth. The investigation had begun. The performance had to be perfect, and neither of them knew which would win, the lie they were building or the truth they were burying. But they were committed now, all the way, past the point of no return. The fabrication started small. First, the emails. Lucien's tech specialist, a woman named Irina, who looked like a librarian and thought like a hacker, sat across from them in a secure room with no windows and explained how to build a digital ghost. "You need correspondence that predates your marriage," she said, fingers flying across 3 keyboards simultaneously. "But it can't look manufactured. Timestamps, metadata, server logs, all of it has to align with legitimate traffic from the periods you're claiming." "Can you do that?" Serafina asked. Irina's smile was thin. "I can make it look like you've been lovers for 3 years. Question is whether you can sell the content convincingly." They spent 6 hours writing fake emails, Serafina crafting messages she'd supposedly sent to Lucien during her marriage to Adrian, casual updates, professional questions, the slow intimacy of 2 people circling each other. Lucien responding with careful interest, appropriate distance, the patience of someone waiting for the right moment. The words felt obscene as she wrote them, each sentence a betrayal of what had actually happened. But she kept writing because the alternative was exposure. "This one's too formal," Lucien said, reading over her shoulder. "We're supposed to be building toward romance. You sound like you're negotiating a contract. I am negotiating a contract, just retroactively. Catherine won't see it that way. She'll see cold calculation. He leaned closer. You need to write like someone falling in love despite themselves. Someone who knows it's dangerous but can't help it. I don't know how to do that. Then remember how you felt about Adrian before it went wrong. Channel that. The suggestion hit like a slap. She turned to look at him. You want me to use real emotions for a fake relationship? I want us to survive. If that requires authenticity built on borrowed feelings, yes. His expression was unreadable. Unless you have a better idea. She didn't. So she wrote emails that sounded like a woman slowly realizing her marriage was empty. Emails that mentioned Lucian casually at first, then more frequently. Emails that danced around attraction without naming it. And Lucian wrote back with the careful interest of someone who saw her clearly and wanted her anyway. By the time Irina finished embedding the emails in appropriate servers with appropriate timestamps, Serafina felt sick. These look real, Irina said with professional satisfaction. If Catherine pulls your correspondence, she'll find a 3-year emotional affair that became physical after your divorce. Perfect, Lucian said. Serafina said nothing. Next came the photographs. Victor arranged locations throughout Prague that could pass for Vienna 3 years ago, Barcelona 2 years ago, Istanbul 18 months ago. They spent a week manufacturing memories. Serafina and Lucien at cafe tables, on street corners, in hotel lobbies, always careful, always distant. The visual language of two people who shouldn't be together but are anyway. The photographer was another of Lucian's people, a man who understood how to make new images look old. He adjusted lighting, added grain, manipulated colors until the photos looked like they'd been taken on phones from different years. Smile at him, Bak, the photographer directed. Not big, just a little, like you're sharing a secret. Serafina tried, felt her face arrange itself into something approximating warmth, looked at Lucien and attempted to project affection she didn't feel. That's terrible, the photographer said flatly. You look like you're being held hostage. Maybe I am. Then pretend you're not. He lowered his camera. Look, I don't care about your actual relationship, but if these photos look forced, they're useless. Catherine will spot the performance. Lucien stepped in. Give us a minute. The photographer retreated. They stood alone in artificial Vienna, surrounded by manufactured memories, trying to become convincing at something they'd never been. This isn't working, Serafina said, because you're trying too hard, thinking too much. Lucien moved closer. Stop performing and just exist. Pretend we're actually here, actually having this moment, actually building towards something. But we're not. I know, but Catherine doesn't. So let's give her what she expects to see. He touched her face. Not aggressively, just a hand against her cheek, thumb brushing her jaw. The gesture was gentle enough to be dangerous. What are you doing? Her voice came out quieter than intended. I'm making this real enough to photograph. His eyes held hers. Stop fighting it and it'll look natural. She wanted to pull away. Wanted to maintain the distance that kept this bearable. But the photographer was watching and Catherine was building her case, and there was no room left for comfort. So she leaned into the touch. Let her eyes soften slightly. Let herself exist in the moment, even though the moment was manufactured. The camera clicked. Better, the photographer said. Again. They did it again. And again. Building a visual history of intimacy that had never existed. By the end of the day, they had 50 photos that looked like evidence of a long-developing romance. Serafina went back to the apartment and stood in the shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash off the feeling of Lucian's hand on her face, the manufactured tenderness, the lie that was starting to feel too real. The interviews came next. Victor arranged for friendly journalists, people who owed Lucien favors or feared him sufficiently. They asked scripted questions designed to build the narrative. How did you meet? When did you know? What made you decide to marry despite the complicated circumstances? Serafina sat beside Lucien in elegant rooms and told lies that sounded like truth. We met at a conference in Vienna, she said to a French reporter who smiled too much. I was there consulting on a panel about emerging markets. Lucien was attending because he had interests in the region. We got coffee afterward and talked for 4 hours. What did you talk about? The reporter's pen moved across her notepad. Everything except what we were supposed to be talking about. Art, philosophy, the way cities change over time. I remember thinking he saw the world differently than anyone I'd met. She glanced at Lucien, finding the performance easier when she didn't look directly at him. I was married then. Nothing happened. But I remembered him. And you stayed in touch? Occasionally. Professional correspondence at first. Then it became more personal. I'd email him about a book I'd read. He'd send me articles he thought I'd find interesting. It was innocent, but it was also... She paused, let the silence suggest things unsaid. It was important. Lucien picked up the thread smoothly. I knew she was married, knew I should keep my distance. But Serafina has this quality. She sees through pretense, makes it impossible to perform around her. So our emails became more honest than most of my actual relationships. When did it become romantic? After her divorce. She called me one night very late. Just needed someone to talk to. I was in Prague, told her to come if she wanted space to think. She did. He looked at Serafina with an expression she couldn't read. And we stopped pretending it was just friendship. The reporter ate it up. Wrote it down with obvious satisfaction. A love story born from emotional connection, deepened through crisis, formalized in marriage. Exactly the narrative they needed. They did 5 more interviews over 2 weeks, each time refining the story, adding small details, building consistency. By the end, Serafina could recite their fictional history without thinking, could describe a Vienna hotel where they'd supposedly had coffee, a Barcelona park where they'd supposedly walked at night, an Istanbul restaurant where he'd supposedly first said he loved her. None of it had happened. All of it sounded true. You're getting good at this, Lucien observed after the last interview, watching her remove makeup in the apartment's bathroom mirror. At lying, at surviving. He leaned against the doorframe. That's what this is. Survival dressed as romance. She met his eyes in the mirror. Does it bother you, creating all of this? Not as much as it should. You? I stopped being bothered 2 weeks ago. Now I'm just efficient. She turned to face him directly. Is that bad? Probably, but bad and necessary often overlap. They stood in the bathroom's clinical light. 2 people who'd become so good at performing intimacy that the performance was starting to erase the truth. Serafina wondered if there was a version of this where they forgot they were lying, where the fabricated history became more real than what actually happened. Catherine's investigation is accelerating, Lucien said, breaking the silence. Victor's people intercepted communication with Europol. She's close to having enough for subpoenas. How close? Days? Maybe a week? He pushed off the doorframe. Which means we need to accelerate too. The story's in place. The evidence exists. Now we need to live it completely. No more hesitation. No more distance. We need to be the couple we've been claiming to be. We're already doing that. No. We're performing in controlled environments. I'm talking about complete integration, shared finances, joint decisions, the kind of day-to-day intimacy that leaves digital footprints everywhere. He paused. And we need to be physically convincing. The implication hung between them. You mean... I mean, Catherine will look for evidence of a real marriage, shared bedrooms we already have, but there's other evidence, patterns of behavior, the small intimacies couples have that aren't performable. He said it clinically, like discussing strategy. We don't have to actually be intimate, but we need to look like we are. Serafina felt something cold settle in her chest. You're asking me to fake that too. I'm asking you to understand what a real investigation looks for. Hotel stays with single beds, purchases of contraception, the digital exhaust of 2 people who share physical space intimately. His expression was carefully neutral. We can manufacture some of it, but it has to be comprehensive. This is insane. This is thorough. He stepped closer. Look, I know this crosses lines we didn't discuss. If you want to draw a boundary, draw it. But understand that every boundary we maintain is a gap Catherine can exploit. She wanted to be horrified, wanted to say this was too far, too invasive, too much performance for any amount of safety. But she'd already crossed so many lines that one more barely registered. Fine, she said. We'll be comprehensive. You're sure? I'm sure that I don't want to go to prison. Everything else is negotiable. Something flickered in his eyes. Approval or concern, she couldn't tell. All right, then we commit fully, starting tonight. Quotes. The full commitment started with small things. Lucien's credit card used to book a weekend at a mountain resort. Serafina's phone showing searches for restaurants in that area. Photos taken at the resort, carefully staged but plausibly candid, uploaded to private cloud storage with timestamps that matched the booking. They didn't actually go to the resort, just built the digital evidence that they had. Then came the shared purchases. Expensive wine delivered to the apartment, concert tickets ordered together, subscriptions to streaming services under a family account. The accumulation of small evidence that two people were building a life. Victor's team monitored Catherine's investigation, feeding back information about what she was finding. Each discovery shaped their next move. When Catherine noticed they had separate phone plans, they consolidated. When she flagged that their bank accounts were still independent, they opened a joint account and ran strategic transactions through it. She's good, Victor admitted during a briefing. Every avenue we close, she finds another. She requested your travel records from the past 3 years, looking for patterns that contradict your claimed timeline. Can she get them? Serafina asked. Eventually. She has Europol backing now. We can delay but not prevent. He pulled up a map showing travel patterns. Problem is, your actual movements don't match your story. You claimed to be in Vienna when you were actually in London, said you visited Istanbul when you were in Singapore. Then we revised the story, Lucian said. Make it vaguer, less specific dates. Too late. You already gave specific dates in interviews. Changing now looks suspicious. Serafina felt the trap tightening. So what do we do? We explain the discrepancies. Lucien was already thinking ahead. We say we were being discreet, using different names for hotel bookings, keeping the relationship hidden because of your marriage to Adrian. It's plausible. It's also exactly what guilty people say. Yes, but it's better than having no explanation. He looked at Victor. How long until she moves? Unknown, but she's building momentum. Every piece of evidence she finds makes her more confident. She's drafting a preliminary report for Europol. If that report is convincing, they'll authorize formal charges. Charges of what exactly? Marriage fraud, money laundering through fraudulent legal structures, conspiracy to obstruct justice. Victor's expression was grim. She's building a comprehensive case, not just about the marriage, about everything you've both done in the past 6 months. The room went silent. Serafina felt the weight of it settling like concrete. This wasn't just about proving their marriage was real anymore. Catherine had expanded her investigation into everything: the consortium that bought Kestrel Corp, the leverage used on Serafina's clients, the entire architecture of revenge they'd built. How much does she know? Serafina asked quietly. More than we'd like. Less than everything. Victor pulled up intercepted communications. She has suspicions about the Kestrel Corp takedown, knows the timing was too perfect, but she can't prove coordination yet. What she can prove is that you married Lucien right as Adrian's empire collapsed. That looks like conspiracy. Because it was conspiracy, Serafina said. Yes, but conspiracy she can't prove and conspiracy she can prove are different problems. Right now we're in the zone where she suspects everything but can document nothing. We need to keep it that way. Lucien stood, began pacing. Then we give her something else to focus on. A new narrative that's more compelling than the truth. Like what? Like the truth. Just curated. He was building it as he spoke. We admit the marriage was fast, admit it looks suspicious, but we explain it as two people who'd been dancing around each other for years, finally taking the leap when circumstances aligned. We don't deny the timing, we embrace it. Say that Adrian's betrayal freed Serafina to pursue what she'd been denying herself. That our marriage was rushed because we'd already wasted years waiting. That's romantic, Victor said with skepticism. Catherine won't buy romantic. She doesn't have to buy it, she just has to be unable to disprove it. Lucien turned to Serafina. But it requires you to sell it completely. No hesitation. No cracks in the performance. I've been selling it for weeks. Not like this. This is testifying under oath territory. This is sitting across from investigators and making them believe every word. His eyes were hard. Can you do that? She thought about the emails she'd written, the photos she'd posed for, the interviews she'd given, the complete reconstruction of their relationship into something it had never been. Yes, she said. I can do that. Good. Because Catherine's going to request interviews soon. We need to be ready. The request came 3 days later. A formal letter delivered through channels requesting that both Serafina and Lucien appear for voluntary interviews regarding their marriage and related financial activities. Voluntary in name only. Refusing would trigger immediate subpoenas. They had 48 hours to prepare. Lucien hired lawyers. Not his usual people. They were too obviously connected to his operations. Instead, he brought in a firm that specialized in international law, people who could navigate the space between legitimate business and criminal enterprise without flinching. The lead lawyer was a woman named Svetlana Petrov, who charged 5,000 euros per hour and was worth every cent. She spent 6 hours grilling them on their story, looking for inconsistencies, testing their responses. When did you first realize you had feelings for Serafina? She asked Lucien. Vienna, the first time we met. She was presenting on market dynamics, and I realized she understood power in a way most people don't. It was attractive. That's vague. Give me specifics. She was wearing gray. Her presentation had a typo on slide 7 that she caught mid-sentence and corrected without breaking stride. Afterward, we had coffee at a place near the conference center. She ordered espresso, no sugar. We talked about— Stop. Svetlana held up a hand. That's too detailed. Sounds rehearsed. It is rehearsed. We're preparing for an interview. Yes, but it can't sound rehearsed. You need to sound like you're remembering, not reciting. She turned to Serafina. Same question to you. When did you first realize you had feelings for Lucien? Serafina thought carefully. I didn't realize at the time. Looking back, probably that same meeting. He asked me a question about ethics in emerging markets, and I said something flippant. He didn't laugh it off. He actually engaged with the idea. Made me defend it. Most people in my life either agreed with me to be polite or disagreed to be contrary. He actually wanted to understand my thinking. That was rare. Svetlana nodded. Better. That sounds real. Now, why did you marry so quickly after your divorce? Because we'd already wasted 3 years. Because I just learned that waiting for the right time meant never having what you want. Because Lucien asked, and I said yes. Why did he ask? Serafina looked at Lucien. They'd practiced this part, but it still felt strange. Because he knew I was finally free. Because he'd been patient long enough. Because— She stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence they'd rehearsed. It felt too intimate, too close to something real. Because what? Svetlana pressed. Lucien answered for her. Because I thought I'd lost my chance 3 years ago and wasn't going to make that mistake twice. The lawyer studied them both. That's good. Use that. It's emotional without being maudlin, honest without being revealing. She closed her notepad. You're as ready as you're going to be. Just remember, Catherine is smart. She'll look for gaps between what you say and what you feel. If you're performing, she'll spot it. We're not performing, Lucien said. Then what are you doing? He looked at Serafina. We're surviving, by whatever means necessary. Nathan. The interview room in London was designed to be intimidating. Gray walls, fluorescent lighting, a table bolted to the floor. Catherine Oakes sat across from them with a younger agent whose name Serafina immediately forgot. Their lawyers flanked them like shields. Catherine looked older than Serafina remembered from family events, more tired, harder. Her eyes were sharp, though, missing nothing. Thank you for coming, Catherine said, voice professionally neutral. I want to start by saying this is a voluntary interview. You're free to leave at any time. However, I do need to inform you that this conversation is being recorded and may be used in future legal proceedings. We understand, Svetlana said. My clients are here to cooperate fully. Good. Catherine opened a folder. Let's start simple. Serafina, how long have you known Lucien Droukov? 8 years. We met at a conference in Vienna. And your relationship during that time? Professional at first. We stayed in occasional contact. Over time, it became more personal. Define personal. We emailed, not frequently, but regularly. About work initially, then about other things, books, travel, ideas. Serafina kept her voice steady. We became friends. Just friends? While I was married, yes. Catherine made a note. And when did that change? After my divorce from Adrian. I was in Barcelona trying to process everything. I called Lucien because I needed someone to talk to who wasn't connected to my old life. He invited me to stay with him in Prague. I did, and we stopped pretending there wasn't something more. How convenient. Your marriage ends, and immediately you're with Lucien. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't convenient. It was complicated and difficult and probably too fast. But it was real. Catherine's expression didn't change. You married 3 months after your divorce. Most people would call that suspiciously quick. Most people haven't spent 3 years wanting something they couldn't have. Serafina met her eyes. I don't expect you to understand, but the timeline made sense to us. I'm sure it did. Catherine turned to Lucien. Mr. Droukov, your business interests are extensive. Can you explain what you do? I manage investment portfolios across multiple sectors: real estate, technology, emerging markets, standard wealth management. Standard? Catherine smiled thinly. Interpol has a different description. They call you a criminal facilitator. Interpol has opinions, not evidence. We'll see about that. She pulled out photographs, the ones Serafina and Lucien had manufactured. These photos show you and Serafina together over the past 3 years. In Vienna, Barcelona, Istanbul, yet hotel records from those dates don't show either of you registered in those cities. Svetlana intervened. My clients were maintaining discretion during a sensitive time. Serafina was married. They used different names for bookings. How convenient. So we just have to take your word for it? You have the photos, Lucien said calmly. You have our email correspondence. You have testimony from people who knew we were in contact. What you don't have is evidence that we're lying. Not yet, Catherine agreed, but I'm thorough. Now, let's talk about Kestrel Corp. Serafina, you were married to Adrian Kestrel when his company collapsed. Then you married Lucien Droukov, whose holdings include the consortium that bought Kestrel Corp's assets. That seems coordinated. It was coordinated, Serafina said. Lucien saw an opportunity. I had knowledge about Adrian's business. We collaborated. While you were in a romantic relationship? Yes. Doesn't that constitute a conflict of interest? Adrian and I were divorced. I had no legal obligation to protect his interests. Catherine leaned forward. But you did have an emotional interest in destroying them. Your very public divorce, his very public affair, this whole thing looks like revenge dressed as business. It was business. The emotional component was incidental. I don't believe you. That's your prerogative, but belief isn't evidence. The interview continued for 3 more hours. Catherine circled back to the same questions from different angles, looking for inconsistencies. Serafina and Lucien held their story, supporting each other's answers, maintaining the facade they'd built. But Serafina could see Catherine wasn't convinced, could see her building something in her mind, connecting pieces they couldn't see yet. When it finally ended, Catherine stood, buttoned her jacket with precise movements. Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch if we need anything further. Are we free to go? Svetlana asked. For now. Catherine looked directly at Serafina. Your mother asked me to check on you, make sure you were safe. I told her I would. I'm fine. Are you? Catherine's expression softened fractionally. Because from where I'm sitting, you've tied yourself to a very dangerous man for reasons I don't quite believe. And I think you know that. You don't know anything about my marriage. I know it looks fabricated. I know the timing is too convenient. I know that everything about this feels like performance. She picked up her folder. But you're right. Feeling isn't evidence. So I'll keep looking until I find some. She left. Serafina sat in the interview room, feeling the walls close in. They'd survived the interview, given consistent answers, maintained their story. But Catherine wasn't done. And whatever she was building, it was bigger than they'd anticipated. They flew back to Prague in silence. Svetlana had told them not to discuss the interview, too much risk of surveillance. So they sat in Lucien's private plane, 30,000 feet above Europe, not speaking. Serafina stared out the window at clouds that looked like ash, thought about Catherine's expression, about her mother asking a friend to investigate, about family love twisted into weapons, thought about the lie she and Lucien were living, how comprehensive it had become, how parts of it were starting to feel true even though they weren't. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You lied to her. I know you lied. See. Her blood went cold. She showed it to Lucien. He read it, expression darkening. "Catherine?" he said quietly. "Must be. She's not supposed to contact you directly. That's harassment. She's desperate. We're convincing enough that she knows she's running out of time to prove we're lying." Serafina looked at him. "What if she's right? What if we can't hold this together? We don't have a choice." "We always have a choice." "Not anymore." He took her phone, deleted the message. "We're past the point where backing down is an option. We either win completely or lose everything. There's no middle ground." The plane hit turbulence. Serafina felt it in her stomach, the sickening drop, the moment when gravity becomes negotiable. Felt like her entire life for the past 6 months. They landed in Prague at midnight. Victor met them at the private terminal, expression grim. "We have a problem," he said. "Another one?" Lucien's voice was flat. Catherine submitted her preliminary report to Europol. They're recommending formal investigation. Assets will be frozen pending review, travel restricted, full financial audit. The words hit like physical blows. "When?" Serafina asked. 48 hours, maybe less." Victor looked at Lucien. "We need to move money. Secure critical assets. Get ahead of the freeze." "That'll look like we're guilty. Sitting here waiting to be crucified will look the same. At least this way we preserve something." Lucien was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Do it. Move everything you can through channels they can't immediately trace, and get our contingency identities ready." "You're running?" Serafina said. "I'm preserving options." He turned to her. "You should do the same. Victor can get you documentation. New name, new passport. A way out if this collapses." "And abandon everything?" "Better than prison." She wanted to argue, wanted to say they could fight this, that truth had to matter somewhere, but she'd stopped believing in truth 6 months ago when she'd first called Lucien. "Fine," she said. "Get me the documentation." Victor nodded and disappeared. Serafina and Lucien stood in the empty terminal, surrounded by the architecture of wealth and mobility, realizing both might be temporary. "This is falling apart," she said quietly. "Not yet, but it's close." He looked at her with something that might have been regret. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this." "You didn't drag me. I walked in voluntarily." "Did you? Or did I just give you what you wanted and charge a price you didn't see coming?" The question hung between them. Serafina thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, the one who'd wanted revenge, who'd thought destroying Adrian would make her whole. That woman seemed impossibly naive now. "Does it matter?" she asked. "We're here now, might as well see it through." "Even if it destroys us both?" "We were already destroyed. This is just making it official." They went back to the apartment. Moved through the rituals of normal life, changing clothes, pouring drinks, pretending tomorrow wasn't going to bring catastrophe. Serafina stood in the bathroom, looking at her reflection, trying to recognize the woman staring back. Lucien appeared in the doorway. "For what it's worth," he said, "you're the most impressive person I've ever watched destroy themselves." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." He came closer. "And an apology. Because I knew this would cost you. Knew you'd lose parts of yourself building what we built. I just didn't realize how much until I watched it happen." She turned to face him. "Did you manipulate me? From the beginning?" He considered the question. "I gave you tools and opportunity. What you did with them was your choice." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." He reached out, touched her face the way he had for the photographs. But this time there was no camera, no performance, just two people who'd become so tangled in lies they couldn't locate truth anymore. "I think we used each other. I think we both got what we wanted and paid prices we didn't anticipate. I think trying to assign blame at this point is useless. So we just accept it? We survive it and figure out who we are on the other side." His hand was still on her face. She should have pulled away, should have maintained the distance that made this bearable. But she was so tired of performing, so exhausted by the constant calculation. She leaned into the touch, let her eyes close, and for just a moment stopped trying to determine what was real and what was fabricated. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Serafina." Her phone shattered the moment. They both jumped. She pulled away, grabbed the phone from the counter. Victor's name on the screen. "Yes?" "Turn on the news. Any channel. Now." She did, pulling up a news app while Lucien crowded close to see. The headline made her stomach drop. Breaking. British intelligence reveals fabricated marriage at center of international criminal investigation. Catherine's face filled the screen. Press conference. Europol logos behind her. After extensive investigation, Catherine was saying, we have conclusive evidence that the marriage between Serafina Vance and Lucien Droukov was fabricated for the purpose of criminal conspiracy. We have documentation showing premeditation, coordination, and systematic fraud designed to obstruct justice. What documentation? Serafina breathed. The screen changed, showed emails. Not the ones they'd fabricated, different ones, real ones. Communications between her and Lucien discussing the marriage as strategy, discussing fabricating evidence, discussing exactly how to make it convincing. Communications she didn't remember having. Those aren't real, she said. We never... Keep watching, Victor said through the phone. Catherine continued. We also have testimony from sources close to both parties confirming that the relationship was entirely strategic, that there was never any romantic involvement, that everything about their marriage was calculated to provide legal protection while they coordinated criminal activities. What sources? Lucien demanded. The screen changed again, showed a face Serafina recognized, Irina, Lucien's tech specialist, the woman who'd helped them fabricate the emails. She was sitting in an interview room speaking to investigators with mechanical precision. I helped them create false correspondence, Irina was saying. Backdated emails, manipulated photos, fabricated evidence of a relationship that didn't exist. They paid me significant amounts to make it look real, but it was all manufactured. I can provide technical documentation of how we did it. The room spun. No, Serafina said. No, she's lying. She helped us, but she wouldn't. She would if they offered her immunity, Lucien said quietly. His face had gone ashen. She would if they found her first and gave her a deal. The press conference continued, Catherine revealing detail after detail. The resort they'd claimed to visit but never went to. The photos staged in Prague to look like other cities. The joint bank account opened specifically to look legitimate. Every piece of their fabrication exposed. Every lie documented. Every strategic choice turned into evidence of guilt. How? Serafina demanded. How did they get all of this? Victor's voice through the phone was grim. Irina. She kept copies of everything. Every fabricated email, every manipulated photo, every piece of evidence we created. She documented the entire process. Why? Insurance. In case we ever turned on her. Except Catherine found her first and turned that insurance into cooperation. The press conference ended with Catherine's final statement. Arrest warrants will be issued within 24 hours. We expect full cooperation from both parties. The screen went dark. Serafina stood in the bathroom, phone in hand, watching her entire fabricated life collapse in real time. Lucien was already moving. Victor, activate the contingency. Get the documentation ready. We need to move in the next 6 hours. Where? Serafina asked. Her voice sounded distant. Broken. Anywhere they can't immediately extradite from. Kazakhstan, maybe, or Dubai. Somewhere we can buy time to... No. He stopped. What? I'm not running. She set down the phone with mechanical precision. I'm done. Serafina, if you stay, they'll arrest you. You'll go to prison. Then I'll go to prison. She looked at him. Because running means spending the rest of my life as someone else. Means abandoning everything. Means proving Catherine right about who I am. She's already right about who you are. We both are. He came closer. We fabricated evidence, conspired to obstruct justice, lied to investigators. We're guilty of everything they're claiming. I know. Then why? Because I'm tired. The words came out raw, honest. I'm tired of performing, tired of calculating, tired of being whatever version of myself survives best. I want to stop. Stopping means losing everything. I already lost everything. 6 months ago, when I decided revenge mattered more than who I was. She met his eyes. The only question now is whether I lose myself completely by running or lose my freedom by staying. At least one of those I can live with. Lucien stared at her like she was speaking a language he didn't understand. You're choosing prison. I'm choosing to stop choosing. There's a difference. That's insane. That's honest? She moved past him toward the bedroom, started pulling clothes from the closet. Not running clothes, just normal ones. You should go. Use the contingency Victor prepared. Disappear before they come. I'm not leaving you. Why not? We're not actually married. Not really. This was all strategy, remember? Performance. There's no reason for you to sacrifice yourself. Except that He stopped. She turned. Except what? He looked at her with an expression she'd never seen, something raw beneath the calculation. Except that somewhere in the past 6 months, the performance stopped being entirely performance, at least for me. The confession hung in the air like smoke. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know when it happened, but at some point between the fabricated emails and the staged photos and the lies we told so convincingly, I started believing them, started feeling something that wasn't strategic. He came closer, started caring about you in a way that makes running alone impossible. Serafina felt something crack in her chest. Don't do that now. Why not? Because it's too late. Because we're about to lose everything, and this just makes it worse, or it makes it bearable. He touched her face again. No cameras this time, no performance, just truth that came 6 months too late. I know you don't feel the same. I know for you this was always about revenge, but I needed you to know before everything ends. She should have pulled away, should have told him feelings didn't matter when they were both about to be arrested, should have maintained the walls that had protected her. Instead, she said, "You're wrong." About what? About me not feeling the same. Her voice cracked. I don't know when it happened either, but somewhere between pretending to love you and actually being with you, the line disappeared, and that terrifies me more than prison. They stood inches apart, two people who'd lied their way into something real, discovering it only as everything collapsed. So what do we do? Lucien asked. We stop running. We face what we did. We accept the consequences. She took his hand. Together. That's not strategic. No, but it's honest, and I think I'm tired of strategy. Lucien pulled her close. She went, letting herself be held while sirens began to wail in the distance, getting closer. For what it's worth, he said into her hair, I don't regret any of it, even knowing how it ends. Me neither. That's probably wrong. Probably. She pulled back, looked at him. But I'm done doing right. Right got me nowhere. Wrong at least got me you. The sirens were very close now. Victor's voice through the phone. They're 2 minutes out. Last chance to run. Lucien picked up the phone. We're not running. You're sure? Yes. Then I'll stay too. Face it together. The line went dead. Serafina and Lucien stood in the bedroom they'd shared as strangers, then as performers, finally as something neither had planned. Outside, the Prague night was shattered by blue lights, by the machinery of justice finally catching up. Any regrets? He asked. She thought about Adrian in prison, about her sister's disappointment, about Margaret's fear, about Catherine's determination, about every choice she'd made in the past 6 months. Just one, she said. What? That we didn't have more time to figure out if what we became was worth what we lost. Maybe that's something we discover in prison. Despite everything, she almost smiled. That's optimistic. That's survival. He kissed her. Once. Briefly. A gesture of solidarity more than romance. Ready? No, but I'm done pretending readiness matters. The door burst open. Armed officers flooded in, shouting commands in Czech and English. Serafina and Lucien raised their hands in synchronized surrender, two people who'd spent 6 months building lies finally facing truth. As they were separated, handcuffed, read rights in languages that barely penetrated, Serafina caught Lucien's eyes across the chaos, saw in them the same thing she felt. Not regret, not quite. Just acceptance that they'd gambled everything and lost. But at least they'd lost together. And somewhere in that truth, buried beneath the rubble of everything they'd destroyed, was something worth the cost. Or so she told herself, as the police led her away from the life she'd built on lies and revenge, into a future where the only truth left was the one she could no longer escape. She'd wanted to destroy Adrian Kestrel. Instead, she'd destroyed herself, and discovered too late that sometimes they were the same thing. The door closed behind her. Prague's night swallowed the sirens. And Serafina Droukov, whoever she was now, disappeared into the consequences of becoming exactly what she'd chosen to be. The holding cell smelled like disinfectant and despair. Serafina sat on a metal bench bolted to concrete, hands still tingling from where the cuffs had cut circulation. The fluorescent lights hummed with a frequency that made her teeth ache. Across from her, a woman with track marks on her arms muttered in Czech, rocking slightly. 3 other women occupied the space, prostitutes or addicts or both. Serafina couldn't tell and didn't care. She'd been separated from Lucien immediately. Different cells, different processing, the machinery of justice grinding them through separate channels even though they'd surrendered together. Her lawyer, not Svetlana, someone local Victor had arranged before his own arrest, had appeared an hour ago with forms and warnings. Extradition requests from multiple countries, charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy to money laundering. A preliminary hearing scheduled for 48 hours from now. Don't say anything to anyone, the lawyer had instructed. Not the police, not other inmates, not even people you think you can trust. Everything you say will be used against you. Then he'd left her alone with women who didn't speak her language and thoughts that wouldn't stop circling. The door opened. A guard appeared, spoke rapid Czech. The woman with track marks stood, shuffled out. The door closed again. Serafina leaned back against the wall, felt the cold seep through her shirt. Thought about Lucien in some other cell. About Victor. About Irina who'd betrayed them. About Catherine whose investigation had finally landed its prey. Thought about Adrian in a different prison, probably reading about her arrest with satisfaction. Revenge coming full circle. She'd destroyed him. Now she'd destroyed herself. The mathematics of it had a sick symmetry. Time moved strangely in the cell. Could have been hours. Could have been minutes. Eventually, exhaustion dragged her into something approximating sleep, head against concrete, dreams full of Catherine's press conference and Lucien's confession, and the moment she'd chosen to stop running. She woke to hands shaking her shoulder. A different guard, female this time, gesturing toward the door. Come. You have visitor. Serafina followed through corridors that all looked identical. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, the institutional architecture of punishment. They stopped at a room with a table and 2 chairs. On the other side of the glass partition sat her sister. Claire looked worse than she had in Prague. Red eyes, no makeup, hands twisting a tissue into confetti. Serafina sat, picked up the phone, waited. Claire picked up her side. You look terrible. I'm in jail. It's not a spa. Don't. Claire's voice cracked. Don't joke, not now. What do you want me to say? I want you to explain how we got here. How my brilliant sister ended up arrested in Prague for marriage fraud and conspiracy. Claire's eyes were wet. Mother won't stop crying. Father locked himself in his study. The family is in chaos because you decided to marry a criminal and destroy yourself for revenge. I didn't destroy myself for revenge. I destroyed myself because I stopped believing in alternatives. That's not an explanation. It's the only one I have. Serafina shifted in the hard chair. How did you know I was here? Catherine called, said she wanted to give me a chance to talk to you before the extradition hearing. One last attempt to make you cooperate. Cooperate how? Testify against Lucien. Give them everything about his operations. In exchange, they'll reduce your charges. Maybe avoid prison entirely. Claire leaned closer to the glass. Take the deal, Serafina. Please. Save yourself. By betraying him. By telling the truth about what he did to you, about how he manipulated you into this marriage, about how he used your pain to build his criminal empire. Serafina almost laughed. Is that what Catherine told you? That I'm a victim? Aren't you? No. I'm a collaborator. I chose this. Every step. Lucien gave me tools, but I used them. I destroyed Adrian with calculation and precision. I fabricated evidence with full awareness. I'm not a victim. I'm guilty. Claire's face crumpled. Then what am I supposed to tell Mother? That her daughter became a criminal voluntarily? That everything she feared about you was true? Tell her I made choices and I'm living with consequences. Tell her I don't regret them enough to lie about them now. You're insane. Maybe, but I'm honest about it. Honest? Claire's laugh was bitter. You spent 6 months fabricating a marriage and you think you're honest? I'm honest about who I became. That's more than most people can say. Her sister stared at her through the glass like she was looking at a stranger. I don't know you anymore. Good, because the person you knew doesn't exist. She died 6 months ago in a Barcelona penthouse. This is what replaced her. And you're okay with that? Serafina thought about the question. about the woman she'd been. Competent, respected, carefully controlled. About the woman she'd become. Ruthless, isolated, capable of things that should have horrified her. "I'm not okay with it," she said finally, "but I chose it, and I'd rather live with difficult choices than comfortable lies." "Even if those choices put you in prison?" "Even then." Claire set down the phone for a moment, pressed her palms against her eyes. When she picked it back up, her voice was quieter. "Catherine says if you don't cooperate, you're looking at 15 years. Maybe more if they prove all the charges." "I know. And you're willing to accept that?" "I'm willing to face what I did. Yes." "What about Lucien? You're protecting him by not cooperating." "I'm not protecting anyone. I'm just not lying to save myself." "That's the same thing." "No. Protecting him would be taking blame for things he did. I'm taking responsibility for things I actually did. There's a difference." Claire looked at her with something that might have been pity or might have been disgust. "He's not worth this. Whatever you think you feel for him, it's not real. It's Stockholm Syndrome or manipulation or—" "It's none of those things," Serafina cut her off. "It's complicated and probably destructive and definitely not what you want to hear. But it's real, and I'm not betraying it to make you comfortable." "So you're choosing him over family?" "I'm choosing truth over performance. That's different." Her sister stood abruptly. "Then I hope it's worth it. Because you're going to lose everything. Your freedom, your reputation, your family, all of it." "I already lost all of that. This just makes it official." Claire looked at her one last time through the glass. "Goodbye, Serafina. When you change your mind, and you will, when reality hits, call me. I'll try to help, but I won't keep trying forever." She left. Serafina sat alone in the visiting room, phone still pressed to her ear, even though no one was on the other end, listening to dead air and her own breathing. The guard came to take her back to the cell. The extradition hearing happened in a courtroom that looked like every other bureaucratic space. Wooden panels, a judge who seemed bored, prosecutors who spoke in legal language designed to obscure rather than clarify. Serafina sat beside her lawyer, wearing clothes Victor's people had arranged before his arrest. A suit that almost fit, hair pulled back. The performance of someone who deserved to be taken seriously, even though everyone in the room had already decided she didn't. Across the aisle, Lucien sat with his own lawyer. They'd been kept separate for 3 days. This was the first time she'd seen him since the arrest. He looked thinner, tired, but his eyes found hers immediately and something passed between them. Not love exactly, but recognition. Two people who'd gambled everything and were now watching the bet get called. The prosecutor stood, a German woman with perfect English and no sympathy. "Your Honor, the European arrest warrant issued by the United Kingdom is comprehensive and well documented. Serafina Droukov, née Vance, and Lucien Droukov are accused of conspiracy to commit fraud, marriage fraud for the purpose of money laundering, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of providing false statements to investigators. The evidence is substantial. We request immediate extradition to London where they will face trial." Serafina's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client disputes these charges. The so-called evidence has been obtained through coercion of witnesses and relies heavily on testimony from a single source who was granted immunity in exchange for cooperation. The prosecution has not proven that the marriage was fraudulent, only that it was strategic, which is not itself a crime." "The marriage was fabricated," the prosecutor countered. "We have documentation of the fabrication process. Emails discussing how to make it look real. Photos staged specifically to deceive. Bank accounts opened purely for appearance. This isn't strategy, it's fraud." The judge looked bored. "Does your client wish to make a statement?" Serafina's lawyer turned to her, expression cautious. They'd discussed this. He'd advised against speaking, said anything she said would be used against her. But Serafina was tired of silence. "Yes," she said, standing. "I'd like to speak." Her lawyer's hand on her arm. "Serafina, I strongly advise. I know what you advise. I'm speaking anyway." The judge gestured. "Go ahead, Mrs. Droukov." The name still felt strange, false and true simultaneously. "The prosecution is right about one thing," Serafina said. "My marriage to Lucien Droukov was strategic. We married quickly. We created documentation to support a narrative. We told investigators a story that was carefully constructed." She paused. But none of that makes the marriage fraudulent. It makes it exactly fraudulent, the prosecutor interjected. No, it makes it complicated. People marry for all kinds of reasons: money, citizenship, convenience, family pressure. Strategic marriages aren't illegal. What's illegal is lying about them for the purpose of committing other crimes. And we didn't do that. You married to obstruct justice regarding Mr. Droukov's criminal activities. We married because we wanted to. The timing was convenient, the circumstances were unusual, but the marriage itself is real. Real. The prosecutor's voice dripped skepticism. You fabricated your entire relationship history. You staged photographs. You created false correspondence. How is any of that real? Serafina looked at Lucien. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. The history we created was false, she said quietly. But what we became in the process of creating it was real. I can't explain the distinction to people who haven't lived it, but I know the difference between performance and truth. And what Lucien and I have, whatever it is, stopped being performance somewhere along the way. That's convenient testimony. That's honest testimony, which is more than I've given in months. The judge made a note. Mrs. Droukov, do you understand that your statement here can be used against you in trial? Yes. And you're willing to testify under oath that your marriage is legitimate despite evidence to the contrary? Yes. Even knowing that perjury carries additional penalties? I'm not committing perjury. I'm telling you the truth you're not equipped to hear, that two people can lie their way into something real. That fabrication and authenticity aren't mutually exclusive. That we built a marriage on false foundations and discovered it was real anyway. The courtroom was silent. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, this is clearly a rehearsed statement designed to create reasonable doubt. I request that— I'll determine what's relevant, the judge interrupted. Looked at Serafina. Sit down, Mrs. Droukov. She sat. The hearing continued for another hour. Legal arguments about jurisdiction and evidence and extradition treaties. Serafina stopped listening, just sat beside her lawyer, feeling Lucien's presence across the aisle, wondering if her confession had helped or hurt. Finally, the judge delivered his ruling. The European arrest warrant appears valid and the evidence substantial. However, the question of whether the marriage is fraudulent is complex enough to require trial. I'm ordering extradition to the United Kingdom where both defendants will face charges. Bail is denied given flight risk. They will be transferred within 72 hours. The gavel fell. Serafina felt hands on her arms, guards preparing to separate them again. She twisted to look at Lucien one more time. He was already looking at her. His mouth formed words she couldn't hear over the courtroom noise. Thank you. Then they were being led to different doors, different transports, different cells, the machinery of justice grinding them into separate compartments, even though they'd tried to stay together. Tumbamos. The transfer to London happened on a gray Tuesday morning. Serafina and 3 other prisoners were loaded into a transport van, hands cuffed, ankles chained. The windows were tinted. She couldn't see where they were going, only feel the movement, the turns, the gradual shift from Czech highways to somewhere else. No one spoke. The other prisoners, all men, all looking harder than she felt, stared at nothing. Serafina closed her eyes and tried not to think about the next 15 years. The van stopped abruptly. Doors opened. They were at an airport, private terminal, small planes. She was separated from the other prisoners, led to a different aircraft. Inside, Catherine Oakes sat waiting. Sit, Catherine said, gesturing to the seat across from her. Serafina sat. A guard locked her cuffs to a bolt in the floor, then left them alone. The plane's engine started with a whine. This is irregular, Serafina said. So is fabricating an entire marriage to obstruct an investigation. Catherine pulled out a folder. We need to talk. My lawyer said, I don't care what your lawyer said. We're flying to London. You have 3 hours. After that, you go into processing and won't have access to anyone except your legal team for days. So talk to me now or don't. Your choice. The plane lifted. Serafina felt the familiar stomach drop of takeoff, watched through the small window as Prague fell away below. What do you want to know? She asked, finally. I want to know if you're actually willing to go to prison for Lucien Droukov or if that was performance for the judge. Does it matter? It matters to me. Catherine leaned forward. Your mother asked me to protect you. I promised her I would, but I can't protect you from yourself. I don't need protection. You need something, because the path you're on ends in prison. Best case scenario, you spend your 30s in a cell. Worst case, you die there. Catherine's expression softened fractionally. I've seen this before. Smart women who tie themselves to dangerous men, who think loyalty is the same as love, who confuse strategy with authenticity. You think that's what I'm doing? I think you married Lucien for revenge and convinced yourself it meant something more. I think you're protecting him because admitting you were wrong feels worse than prison. And I think you're smart enough to know all of this, but too proud to acknowledge it. Serafina looked at Catherine, this woman who'd known her family for decades, who'd watched her grow up, who thought she was saving her. You're partially right, Serafina said. I did marry him for revenge. I did fabricate evidence. I did lie to investigators, including you. But you're wrong about why I'm protecting him. Then enlighten me. I'm not protecting him. I'm protecting myself. Because the only thing I have left is the truth about what we became. If I betray that to save myself, I lose the last piece of who I am that's worth preserving. That's rationalization. That's survival. Serafina shifted in her seat, chains clinking. You think I don't know I'm going to prison? You think I haven't calculated the cost? I know exactly what I'm facing, but I'd rather face it honestly than escape it through lies. Catherine studied her for a long moment. He's not worth this. Whatever you think you feel, that's not for you to decide. No, but I can offer you a way out. She opened the folder, slid documents across the small table. Full immunity, witness protection if needed, complete cooperation in exchange for testimony against Lucien Droukov and his organization. Serafina didn't touch the papers. What would that testimony include? Everything. His operations, his network, his methods, every crime you witnessed or participated in, every person you can name. Catherine paused. It would dismantle his empire completely, and it would free you, at the cost of betraying everything I built with him. You built criminal enterprise. That's not something worth protecting. Maybe not, but it's the truth of who I became, and I won't lie about it. Even if lying saves you? Especially then. Catherine sat back, frustration clear on her face. I don't understand you. You're brilliant, capable. You could rebuild your life, but you're choosing prison to protect a man who used you. He didn't use me. We used each other. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, he got what he wanted, a strategic marriage that protected his assets. And you got arrested. We both got arrested. That's partnership. That's insanity. Mom? Maybe. Serafina looked out the window at clouds that looked like cotton. But it's my insanity, and I'm keeping it. Catherine gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder with sharp movements. Fine. When you're sitting in a cell 5 years from now, remember you had a choice. Remember I offered you a way out. I'll remember. Serafina met her eyes. And I'll still choose the same thing. Why? Because the woman who'd betray Lucien to save herself is the same woman who'd have stayed with Adrian, who'd have accepted humiliation quietly, who'd have played by rules that only apply to people without power. She leaned forward as far as her chains allowed. I'd rather be in prison as someone who chose her own destruction than free as someone who survived through betrayal. That's pride. That's integrity, or the closest I can get to it anymore. The plane flew on through empty sky. Catherine eventually stood, moved to a different seat, began working on her laptop. Conversation over. Serafina sat alone with her chains and her choices, watching England appear through the clouds like a judgment. Cawing. London's processing was efficient and dehumanizing. Fingerprints, photographs, strip search, medical examination, forms in triplicate. Her belongings confiscated, replaced with institutional clothing that smelled like industrial detergent. Then a cell, smaller than Prague's. One bunk bed, one toilet, one tiny window showing sky through bars. Her cellmate was already there, a woman maybe 40, with scars on her knuckles and eyes that had seen things. She looked up when Serafina entered, assessed her with the quick calculation of someone used to evaluating threats. You're the fraud woman, she said, British accent, working class. Saw you on telly. Apparently. Married some crime boss. Made it all up. That true? Partially. Which part? The making it up part. The marriage is real. The woman snorted. Right, I'm sure it feels real when you're facing 15 years. Serafina didn't argue. Just claimed the top bunk, lay down on the thin mattress, stared at the ceiling. Her cellmate was quiet for a while. Then, name's Rita. I'm in for assault. Stabbed my boyfriend when he came at me drunk. They call it attempted murder. I call it survival. Serafina. I know, everyone knows. You're famous here, the rich woman who fell for a gangster and destroyed herself. Rita laughed without humor. Makes good drama anyway. It wasn't drama, it was calculation. Same thing, innit? Drama's just calculation with emotions. Serafina thought about that. About the 6 months of calculation. About the emotions that had bled in despite her best efforts. About Lucienne's confession and her own, and whether any of it mattered now. Maybe, she said. They lay in silence. Somewhere down the cell block, someone was crying. Someone else was shouting. The ambient noise of incarceration, hundreds of lives compressed into concrete boxes, all of them waiting for something. Your man's 2 floors up, Rita said. The Droukov one. They keep the high-profile prisoners separate. Better cells. More security. You've seen him? Saw them transfer him in. Looks like someone you'd stay loyal to. Handsome in that dangerous way. She paused. Is it worth it? The loyalty? I don't know yet. Well, you got time to figure it out. 15 years is a lot of time. Serafina closed her eyes. Tried to imagine 15 years in cells like this. 15 years of Rita and women like her. 15 years of crying and shouting and waiting. Tried to imagine walking out at 50, having lost her 30s and 40s to concrete and bars. The future stretched ahead like a canyon. The preliminary hearing was a spectacle. Press outside the courthouse. Cameras everywhere. Protesters with signs. Some supporting her, most condemning her. The machinery of public opinion grinding them both into whatever narrative sold best. Serafina was led through a back entrance, hands cuffed, wearing clothes her lawyer had arranged. In the courtroom, she saw Lucien for the first time since Prague. He looked thinner, harder. Prison was stripping away the polish, revealing something rawer underneath. Their eyes met. He nodded slightly. She did the same. The prosecution laid out their case with clinical precision. The fabricated emails. The staged photographs. Irina's testimony about how they'd created evidence. The timeline that made everything look coordinated. Then they showed new evidence. Financial records proving that Serafina had used her consulting firm to gather intelligence on Adrian's company. Communications suggesting premeditation. A case built not just on fraud, but on calculated destruction. The defendants didn't just lie about their marriage, the prosecutor said. They weaponized it. Used it as a shield to coordinate the systematic dismantling of Adrian Kestrel's empire. This wasn't romance. It was a conspiracy executed with precision. Serafina's lawyer mounted a defense, argued that strategic marriages weren't illegal, that gathering publicly available information wasn't a crime, that the prosecution was conflating poor judgment with criminal intent. But even Serafina could hear how weak it sounded. Then came Irina. She walked to the witness stand wearing immunity-like armor. Didn't look at Serafina or Lucien, just sat and answered questions with mechanical precision. Did you help the defendants create false evidence of a relationship? Yes. What did that involve? Fabricating emails with backdated timestamps. Manipulating photographs to appear older than they were. Creating digital footprints that suggested a relationship that didn't exist. Did you witness any genuine romantic involvement between them? No. Every interaction I saw was strategic. They discussed the marriage like a business arrangement. Everything was calculated. Did they ever express actual feelings for each other? Not in my presence. It was always about outcomes, about what the marriage would accomplish. Serafina felt something twist in her chest. The testimony was true and false simultaneously. True about the beginning, false about what they'd become. But Irina had only seen the beginning, had left before the performance became something else. Lucien's lawyer cross-examined. But you only worked with them for 6 weeks, correct? Yes. And you were granted full immunity in exchange for this testimony? Yes. So you have every incentive to portray their relationship as fraudulent, even if it evolved beyond what you witnessed? I'm telling the truth about what I saw, which is limited. You can't testify about what happened after you left. No, but I can testify about what they paid me to create, and it was all fabrication. The cross-examination continued, but the damage was done. Irina had given the prosecution exactly what they needed, an insider witness describing calculated fraud. During a recess, Serafina's lawyer pulled her aside. "This isn't going well," he said quietly. "Irina's testimony is devastating, and the financial evidence makes you look like you were planning this from the beginning. Because I was planning it, just not the marriage part. That distinction isn't helping us. The jury will see coordination and conclude everything was fraudulent." He paused. "There's still time to take a deal. Catherine's offer is still open." "I'm not testifying against Lucian." "Then you need to prepare for conviction and a substantial sentence." "How substantial?" 10 to 15 years, maybe more if they prove all the charges. The number hit like a physical blow. 10 to 15 years. She'd be in her late 40s when she got out. Would have lost her entire prime to prison. "What about Lucien?" "His charges are more extensive. He's looking at 20 years minimum." 20 years, he'd be 60. Would emerge an old man if he emerged at all. "Can we see each other?" Serafina asked. "Before the verdict?" "That's unusual, but I can request it." "Do it." Yet. The meeting happened in a secure room with guards watching through glass. Serafina sat on one side of a table bolted to the floor, Lucien on the other. No physical contact allowed, just two people separated by metal and air and the consequences of their choices. "You look terrible," Lucien said. "Prison's not a spa." "Heard that before." His mouth twitched in something almost like a smile. "How are you holding up?" "I'm not, but I'm still here." She leaned forward. "Your lawyer says you're looking at 20 years. Optimistically, could be more. And you're okay with that?" "I'm not okay with anything, but I'm accepting it." He looked at her directly. "What about you? Your lawyer pushed the cooperation deal?" "Multiple times." "You should take it." That stopped her. "What?" "You should take it. Testify against me. Get immunity. Walk away." He said it calmly, like discussing weather. "There's no point in both of us going down." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. I'm guilty of everything they're claiming. You got pulled into my world and convinced yourself it was partnership. But it wasn't. I used your pain and your intelligence and your desire for revenge. I should pay for that. You shouldn't." Serafina felt anger rise in her chest. "That's bullshit. I made my own choices." "Did you? Or did I just give you tools and let you think you were choosing?" "Don't do that. Don't rewrite this as if I was some victim you manipulated. I walked into your villa voluntarily. I fabricated evidence voluntarily. I married you voluntarily." Her voice rose. The guard shifted. She forced herself quieter. "I'm not some innocent you corrupted. I'm guilty of everything they're claiming, too. Then we're both idiots." "Maybe. But we're idiots together." Lucien looked at her with something complicated in his expression. "You know what I realized in prison?" "What?" "That I spent my whole life building walls, protecting myself, never letting anyone close enough to matter. Then you walked into my villa 6 months ago, and I thought I could help you destroy Adrian while keeping you at distance. Thought I could use your intelligence without risking anything real. And somewhere between the fabricated emails and the staged photos and the lies we told so convincingly, you got past every wall I'd built, made me care in ways I'd spent years avoiding, made me want to protect you even when protection means losing you. That's why you want me to take the deal." "Yes. No." The word came out hard. "I'm not taking it. Serafina, listen to me. I didn't survive 6 months of transformation to betray the one real thing I found in all of it. I didn't choose this path to abandon it when it gets difficult. You want to protect me? Then accept that I'm choosing to stay, to face this, to go to prison rather than save myself through your destruction." That's pride. That's love. The word hung between them. She'd never said it before, never named what they'd become. Or whatever version of love two broken people can build from lies and calculation and the slow realization that performance became truth. Lucien stared at her. "You're insane." "Probably. But I'm insane with you, which is better than sane and alone." He reached across the table. She did the same. Their fingers met halfway, barely touching before the guards shouted warnings. They pulled back. But the contact had been enough. If we do this, Lucienne said quietly, if we both go to prison, we lose years, decades potentially. I know. And we might not make it. Prison changes people. We might go in as this and come out as something else. I know that too. Then why? Because the alternative is betraying the only honest thing I've built in 6 months. And I can survive prison. I don't know if I can survive being the woman who saved herself by destroying you. Lucienne was quiet for a long time. Then, you're the most terrifyingly stubborn person I've ever met. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, and a warning that I'm going to keep trying to convince you to save yourself. And I'm going to keep refusing. Then I guess we're both idiots. Together, she finished. The guard announced time was up. They stood simultaneously, looked at each other across the bolted table one more time. See you at sentencing, Lucienne said. Try not to get stabbed before then. Same to you. They were led to separate doors, separate cells, separate futures that would run parallel through concrete and bars in the slow grind of years. But at least they were parallel. At least neither was alone. Yes, the verdict came on a Thursday. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the courtroom was packed. Press, protesters, curious observers who wanted to witness the fallen billionaire's wife get what she deserved. Serafina stood beside her lawyer, hands folded, face carefully neutral. Across the room, Lucien stood with his. They didn't look at each other, didn't need to. The foreman read the verdicts. On the count of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. On the count of marriage fraud for purposes of money laundering, guilty. On the count of obstruction of justice, guilty. On the count of providing false statements to investigators, guilty. On and on. Guilty on every count. Lucien's verdicts came next, guilty across the board. Additional charges for racketeering, for operating criminal enterprise, for crimes that predated Serafina by years. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks. They were remanded to custody pending. As guards led her out, Serafina caught Lucien's eyes one final time. Saw in them the same thing she felt, not regret exactly. Just acceptance that they'd gambled everything and lost. But at least they'd gambled together. In her cell that night, Rita asked, "How bad?" "Bad? How bad is bad?" 15 years probably, maybe more. Rita was quiet, then, "You got family? Someone on the outside who'll wait?" Serafina thought about her sister's disappointment, about her mother's tears, about Catherine's frustrated attempts to save her. "No," she said, "just him." "The Droukov one?" "Yeah." "That's rough. Hard to build a life with someone when you're both inside." "We'll figure it out." "You're optimistic." "I'm committed. There's a difference." Rita laughed without humor. "You're something, I'll give you that. Most people crack by now, start making deals, turning on each other, but you're holding on." "What else is there?" "Survival. Self-preservation. The things that actually matter." "Maybe those things matter for some people. For me, this matters more." "This being what? A man you barely know? A marriage you fabricated?" "This being the truth about what we became despite how we started. This being the one real thing I built from lies." Serafina rolled over to face the wall. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me. 6 months ago, I was someone different. Someone who believed in rules and fairness and the idea that merit mattered. Then my husband kissed another woman on camera, and I realized none of that was true. So I became someone else. Someone harder. Someone who could destroy a man completely and not lose sleep. And that's better? It's honest, which is more than the person I was before could say." She paused. "Lucien didn't make me into this. He just gave me permission to become what I would have been all along if I'd had the courage." Rita was quiet for a long time. "You really love him, the Droukov one." "I don't know if it's love, but it's real, and I'm not giving it up to save myself. Even if it costs you everything? I already lost everything. This is just making it official." EOS. Sentencing day arrived with gray skies and rain. Serafina was led into the courtroom wearing the same clothes as the verdict. Lucien was already there. They were positioned to not see each other. Deliberate cruelty or bureaucratic efficiency, she couldn't tell. The judge was different this time. Older. A woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human failure. She read from prepared remarks. This court has reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the verdicts rendered by the jury. The defendants have been found guilty of serious crimes involving fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. These are not minor infractions. They represent calculated efforts to subvert legal systems for personal gain. Serafina listened to her own destruction narrated in legal language. However, the court also recognizes certain mitigating factors. Both defendants have no prior criminal records. Both have shown genuine remorse, not for their crimes, but for the circumstances that led to them, and both have demonstrated a commitment to accepting responsibility for their actions. A pause. Rain against windows. Serafina Droukov, please stand. She stood, felt her lawyer's hand briefly on her arm. Supportive or warning, she couldn't tell. You are hereby sentenced to 12 years in prison for the crimes to which you've been convicted. You will serve a minimum of 8 years before parole eligibility. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of £2 million and are subject to asset forfeiture proceedings for property gained through fraudulent means. 12 years. She'd be 46 when she got out. Middle-aged, having lost her entire 30s to concrete and bars. She sat. Lucien Droukov, please stand. Lucien stood, his lawyer beside him looking defeated. You are hereby sentenced to 18 years in prison for the crimes to which you've been convicted, plus additional sentences for prior criminal enterprise to be served concurrently. You will serve a minimum of 15 years before parole eligibility. Additionally, you are subject to complete asset forfeiture and permanent restrictions on business activities upon release. 18 years. He'd be 63, an old man if he survived. The judge concluded with remarks about justice and consequences and deterrence. Serafina stopped listening, just sat feeling the weight of 12 years settling on her shoulders like concrete. As they were being led out, separate doors again, always separate, Lucien managed to turn, catch her eyes one final time. His mouth formed words. Worth it. She didn't know if he was asking or stating. Either way, her answer was the same. She nodded. Then the doors closed and they were separated again. Taken to different prisons, different futures, different cells where they'd spend the next decade becoming whatever prison made them. But as Serafina was processed into her permanent facility, more fingerprints, more photographs, more forms, she felt something unexpected. Not peace, not quite, but a kind of clarity. She'd chosen this. Every step, every transformation, every lie that became truth, and now she'd chosen to face the consequences rather than escape through betrayal. That had to count for something. Even if it only counted in her own mind, even if the cost was everything, her new cell was identical to the temporary one. Same bars, same concrete, same small window showing sky that was always gray. But this time when she lay down on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling, she didn't feel destroyed. She felt certain. 2 floors up, in a different wing, Lucien lay in his own cell thinking similar thoughts. They'd lost everything, but they'd lost it together. And somehow, against all logic and reason and sanity. That felt like winning. The story should have ended there, with 2 people in separate cells, accepting their sentences, settling into the long grind of years. But 3 days before Serafina was scheduled for permanent transfer to a maximum security facility, something happened. A guard appeared at her cell in the middle of the night. Come with me. Don't ask questions. She followed through corridors she didn't recognize, into a section of the prison that felt different, quieter, more controlled. The guard opened a door. Inside, a man in an expensive suit sat at a table. Not her lawyer, someone else. Sit, the man said. She sat. My name is Marcus Webb. I represent certain interests that have been monitoring your case. He slid a folder across the table. I'm here to make you an offer. I'm not interested in deals. You will be. Because this one changes everything. He opened the folder, showed her documents she couldn't immediately process. How would you like to see Lucien Droukov walk free, and yourself along with him? Her heart stopped. That's impossible. Nothing's impossible, just expensive. He smiled. And someone very powerful wants to make this expense. But it requires your cooperation, complete cooperation, starting now. Who? Who wants this? Someone who believes you and Mr. Droukov are more valuable outside prison than inside. Someone who has plans that require your particular skills. He leaned forward. But you need to decide immediately. This offer expires when you leave this room. Serafina looked at the documents, at the impossible promise of